Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of Sketch Watch Play. I am John Fleury.
And I'm Christopher Wade. How you doing, ladies and gentlemen?
I hope they are doing well. Happy belated Easter. We're recording this almost a week afterward.
Yes. We
are a twice-a-month geek pop culture podcast talking TV, film, cartoons, video games, and all sorts of topics that fall into those categories. You can find us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and I think just most general podcast directories. I use a third-party app on my phone, and we're there. So if you enjoy what you hear and you're new to us, please consider subscribing to us on your platform of choice to stay up to date. You can follow us on social media at SketchWatchPlay on Twitter and Facebook.com/SketchWatchPlay, which seems to be our most popular social portal right now. And we encourage you to leave feedback on those. It would really help if people leave reviews on iTunes, because apparently that helps people, that makes them promote it more or something. You can also email us directly via sketchwatchplaygmail.com. Tell us what you like, what you don't like, and suggest possible topics for us to talk in the future. We're totally open to that.
Yeah.
How have things been for you, Chris? How'd Easter and everything in the past week or two go?
Easter was all right. I can't make any good general complaints. Did you see my post on Twitter asking people like if they ever did the thing that I used to do as a kid?
Which one?
Okay, so my Easter tradition as a child was my grandmother would wake us up bright early in the morning to go watch the sun dance during Easter morning, because that's apparently what the sun does to celebrate Easter. Easter. Yeah, to celebrate
dances.
Yeah, no one answered that.
Did you do it this year?
No, not this year. It was when I was a kid.
Okay. I mean, it's still a good excuse. I appreciate Easter the same way I do Christmas, and that's a good excuse to get family together.
Yeah, that's always nice.
I've mentioned in the past I have a big-ass extended family, so I went down Saturday afternoon and spent that until Easter afternoon at my parents' farm that I've talked about, which is like a really little remote area of Maryland where the rest of the family was.
Yeah.
And you know this, and so do some people who know me on like Facebook and Instagram and such. It is still a tradition for when we get up, they hide our baskets of candy and are like, go find it in the house. But they were doing something interesting this year where they were like, please stay in your room. And my mom was marching back up and down the hallway, making a lot of noise.
Oh.
And we started hearing like something like bird chirps. And for the record, it was me, my brother Patrick, past guest of the show, his girlfriend Kaylin, and our sister Caroline. And he was saying to us, because we share a room at the farm, are those coming from inside the house? And I was like, I bet it's just a bird on the roof or right outside. But then we walked into the room, and it very much sounded like little baby chicks peeping from the living room and kitchen. And
oh, wow.
So just a little groundwork for why they got baby chicks, because it's not a case of John, take them home with you and raise the chicken. No, my parents are legit starting in the early stages of a farm there. They legit would love to devote themselves to it when they retire. My mom grows vegetable gardens, and my dad has both a beehive far away from the house, obviously, and that he's harvested some honey from, but also a chicken coop. We've had for a while 4 fully grown hens who lay eggs. We're not gonna. He also does consider them like pets, so he's not going to just chop their heads off ceremoniously. So, but he had been meaning to expand and maybe get some roosters. So he went to a farmer's market the previous day, bought 4 baby chicks. And the cute thing was, so he put each one of them in another container next to the basket so they wouldn't run out, and let us spend the morning each with a chick and name it. So I named mine Whiskers because chicks aren't super loud, but they are very talkative. Like, you hear the peep, 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 they just keep it going. Yeah. And it's the same with adult chickens. They just cluck all the time. Yeah. And so I was picking him up and petting it and just trying to get it calm, because I don't know if it was scared or just excited. But the moment I tried, I'll just kind of hug it, and I put it under my beard because I didn't shave for a few days. Yeah. It got really quiet and comfy. Like, oh, you like my beard? Well, I'm naming you Whiskers. And the other names were more silly. Patrick named his Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and Caroline. What?
I was saying you have quite the way with birds, dude. It's quite adorable.
Oh, yeah, we've talked about squawks in the past, and I had a parakeet before that. Yeah, I love animals. What can I say? Patrick named his Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Caroline named hers John Muir, who's like the creator of social environmental. It's something that she's studying, I guess.
Wow.
And Caitlin was the only other normal name. She named hers Judy.
Okay.
And apparently that's the only one we actually know is a girl because of the marking to the species. So any of these other three could be either gender, and so there's a good chance we'll have our first rooster. So they're keeping them. My parents are obviously they've took this whole week off, to stay at the farm and keep an eye on the chicks. They have them at a little. They're not out with the main ones yet because they're apparently, and I guess this explains the beard. Chicks, until they're fully grown and have their feathers, they need a lot more heat than most animals.
They can't
do it themselves. So he has them in a little tub in the basement with a big red heat lamp. The next best thing to a mama hen to sit under.
Yeah.
And keeping them fed, keeping an eye on them. They're very, very cute little birds, and it'll be funny. Apparently, they'll start almost full size within like a month. Like, these things grow crazy, crazy fast, even by other animal standards.
That's amazing. Cool.
Yeah, so that was the big thing. Also caught up with some other family. Found out by chance a distant relative's current job is organizing events for Mike Pence. So there's that.
Okay.
And the other two things I'll say real quick. Mimi was there. My grandma. I mentioned in the past. A week ago, I put up her latest movie watch that I've talked about. I showed her Avengers. She freaking loved it. And that video's blown up, man. It's already hit 100,000 views today.
Oh wow, that's cool.
And it's gotten me I flew past 2,000 subscribers up to 2,500 now.
That's awesome.
I had been wondering if I should keep doing that because I'm I don't want people to just watch those, but it actually turns out it's bumping up the views of my other stuff too, the cartoons, the reviews. So I'm and I think the other thing that convinced me is I look at the comments for these videos, and you know how YouTube comment sections are, but this is the most genuine YouTube comment section in the world. That just makes people so happy.
That's good because there are people who genuinely want to come to YouTube just to have nice, sweet things happen to their eyes, and that's fine. That's
Mimi in a nutshell.
Yeah,
I would love for you and Serena to meet my parents, and I'd also love for you to meet Mimi because she's just the nice old grandmother incarnate, pretty much.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
Yep, maybe someday. And the last thing I'll say is. Two quick things. One, you might be able to notice it in this show after I say it. I went and bought a pop filter.
A pop filter?
Do you know what those are?
Oh, yes. For your microphone, right?
Yeah, it's like a little screen you clip in front of your mic. And basically, if you listen to old episodes, sometimes if you do a P noise, a hard P, they call it, a P, then the sound pops. It crackles a little bit because you can blow the mic out.
Oh, yeah. I actually have one. So,
I don't feel like you do it often, but I felt like I was due for it with this and the reviews.
Yeah.
And the other quick thing is we talked about this a little bit because I think we brought up in the past. I mentioned in the past that we love the idea of the YouTube animation collabs. Because one of your favorite things last year was the animated Grump. And I brought up the Mom Luigi Reanimate, which a friend of ours worked on, Todd.
Yeah.
And I actually finally watched that in full the other day, and holy shit, I knew it would be really well animated, but I didn't expect to laugh as hard as I did.
Yeah.
Every other shot that's throwing something ridiculous at you, and it's great.
Yeah, there's some genuine talent out there that's pulling out some pretty awesome stuff.
Well, we're both kind of dipping our toes into this idea. If it's okay for me to mention what you're doing,
go for it.
I know there's a trend with Nintendo stuff. I sent this thing to you and you're like, oh yeah, I'm already in it. I was like, oh sweet, and I almost said shit, but that makes sense. I applied for it, but I think they were already full up by then. They're doing a Kirby Reanimate, an episode of the Kirby anime, the very meta one where they make their own anime.
Yeah.
You can see clips that have been finished on Twitter. Some of it looks legit amazing. I'm excited for that because I do like that show quite a bit.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned you liked the 4Kids stuff back in the day. And so mine is not as high class, but I think there's going to be a lot of humor from it. Some guy had the idea, let's reanimate all the cutscenes from Hotel Mario.
Oh boy! Oh,
that's spaghetti.
Have fun.
I am. It's cool to do animate Mario and Luigi talking, and you're not restricted by the dumb art style of that. The timing and audio, yes, but they've said because if you watch those cutscenes, there are pauses because I think the disc is loading, and they're you can fill that stuff that are visually with whatever you want. Don't edit the audio, but so I'm having Mario read one line, then Luigi duck in, looking all freaked out.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say it right here because I brought it up briefly, and I'm putting early pieces and ideas for it together, but I'm going to wait until I finish my Mario shot. I'm going to try and make it happen. Donkey Kong Country Reanimate.
That's going to be great, dude. Because I know a lot of people have I don't want to say, I don't want to say they remember positively about
some
Donkey
people
Kong
do like the
Country.
show.
Yeah,
I like elements of it.
Well, I think elements of it is what
it's gonna. I feel like it would benefit the most from reanimation because it just looks so shitty.
Yeah, it's gonna be. I think there's a lot to pull from because of how.
I found a good episode for it too because it's one, it has like legit almost all the main characters in it, and two, it doesn't involve that stupid coconut. It's them just looking for buried treasure, which I'm like, if you were gonna do an actual show closer to the game, like that could be a plot.
Yeah.
There's still horrible songs in acting animation, but whatever.
Yeah, there are.
It'll be fun to work with.
Yeah, I think I think you guys will have a good time.
I'll keep people posted on when that stuff happens. I'm working on some other stuff for now. But let's get into. So this is an all movie episode.
Yes,
kind of a rarity for us. I feel like we usually have a mix of like that or TV shows or games. So we'll start with our current media. We each saw one very very current movie, and I'll just go first because. Now, granted, it's in limited release right now, but around the time this episode comes out, you'll probably be close to or able to find it in full release, and that is Wes Anderson's second animated film, Isle of Dogs.
We get the idea. You're looking for your lost dog spots. Does anybody know it?
No.
Now,
the first animated film was what? It was
Fantastic Mr. Fox.
Yes, it was. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
and I enjoyed that a lot.
Yeah. Do you have any other familiar experience with him, that director?
Oh, totally. Like Fantastic Mr. Fox was one that I watched.
Yeah.
And I caught what was the Grand Budapest Hotel, which
one was I think his most recent one. What?
Which was great.
I want to see it. It looks up my alley because honestly, years ago I tried watching Life Aquatic and I gave up after a half hour. It just didn't seem like my kind of film. But and I liked because I saw Fantastic Mr. Fox in theaters with both my siblings because it was based on a Roald Dahl book. Who I adore that guy. And I actually remember as a kid that being one of the less impressive books, but they took some liberties and made a really cool movie out of it. And I actually liked it more the second time I watched it because I had a better idea of what kind of style I was in for. Because even when he does a stop motion cartoon, it just has a unique, quirky, do things your own way kind of vibe to how it's framed and timed and written.
Definitely.
And Isle of Dogs, the plot at its core is very different, but looking at this movie and listening to and watching it, you can totally tell that this is the same guy, and I assume some of the same creative team. And I think it is a pretty safe bet that if you enjoyed Fox and his general vibe, this should be right up your alley. I really liked it.
Oh, cool.
And I will say, if you're a listener of us who is in the D.C., Maryland area and you want to see it early, I saw it at the Angelica Theater in the Mosaic District in Fairfax. And I meant to tell you, it took me a second to recognize one of the workers there at the cafe. It was James Rambo.
Yeah, I caught Rambo a couple of times over there.
I did not know until I went there to see the movie, and that was fun to catch up with him. The guy who taught you to be able to enjoy movies even when they're bad, like with Mario.
Yeah.
So thanks, James.
Definitely. So I'm trying to figure out. I heard there was a weird limited release for some reason. Do you know anything more about that?
I did just do research that. Yeah, it opened in limited release about a week or two ago, but it's going to go wide in about a week and a half, I think. Maybe next weekend, and that happens sometimes with quirkier movies. I think. Get open it early, so to get the diehard Anderson or art house fans in, and then after you made some money, you can open. I don't know if that's the thing behind it, but it's a thing Hollywood does pretty often with. They do it with more out of the box movies, I think. I'm sure there's a financial reason for that. But it is kind of interesting to apply that to this movie because something I do admire about it and Fantastic Mr. Fox is I'm really grateful. I feel like people, even if you're someone who doesn't like his style in these movies, you can at least appreciate that we still have directors who are able to make these totally against the mold cartoons that get wide release and decent budgets. That almost never happens. But if you get a director with enough clout, like Wes Anderson, you get stuff like this. And now, do you know anything about the plot or cast of this movie?
I know a little bit about the plot, but why don't you go ahead and let our viewers know?
Just in case near future Japan. It's all set in Japan. the idea is they do a prologue where like there's a dog narrator because the dogs all talk. Also, if you're a cat person, you might get pissed off. There are only a few cats in this being held by villains like they're Blofeld or Dr. Evil's cat. And they don't talk, and they all have like perpetual scowls like their grumpy cat.
No, I love it.
Wes Anderson is clearly a dog person. Sorry, Serena. But the idea is basically a dog flu epidemic happens. They're getting like, they're very germ ridden, they're sick, and people are worried about it spreading. So the leaders ultimately decide to quarantine and relocate the dogs to like this trash island, junk, and like they'll drop rations for them and stuff. But it's like they got to stay there from now on. But as it turns out, the mayor of Japan, I guess, or maybe I think they say it's of a district, but he was the main guy who spearheaded the quarantine. His nephew, who he is his ward, his own dog was taken as a result of it. So the catalyst is this kid whose name is Atari. Flying his own plane and crashing on the aisle, hoping to find Spots, his dog. He's brought a picture. Now, all the dogs. Fantastic Mr. Fox actually did make it clear at some point that the animals and humans could just talk to each other just because. This is a little more unclear. I want to say no, but it's hard to say because there's. But so all the dogs, they do speak English, and there's a lot of recognizable names. The main characters basically are not any of the humans, but Chief, who is the leader of this main pack we follow, voiced by Bryan Cranston, who's great, and the dog Spots, who the dog that Atari's looking for. We get some flashbacks of his time with him because he's basically assigned as like a bodyguard dog, but learned to love him. And then when we do reunite with Spots, he's got his own like whole subplot and stuff going on. It's interesting to see where that goes and how it connects with other characters. Voiced by Leif Schreiber, by the way.
Oh, cool.
There are a lot of other, like the rest of the dogs, even the smaller ones, get a lot of big names because Chief is with this like quartet of, or I can't remember, I think it's 4 other dogs who, if I do have a complaint about those, is that they don't get enough time to shine. Like they generally maybe have one little quirk. The main one I noticed, there's one voiced by Jeff Goldblum, who for whatever reason he's always the one to like bring the news to them. Like, did you hear the rumor about this and this? And at one point they even ask him like, how do you know all this? And he's like, well, I mean, word gets around. You didn't hear about this? There's like concepts like one of them was a mascot for a dog food company that closed down when the epidemic happened. One of them is the mascot for like a baseball team and stuff like that. Cute stuff like little gimmicks like that. But I will say their banter between each other through the movie is really, really fun. It is like, I may have made it sound like a very dire premise, but even when sad things happen in Anderson's movies, they generally don't go for a gloomy, serious vibe. There's still a lot of asides, quirky visuals, quirky concepts, and I there are even parts of it where I feel like they're initially not sure what you're meant to feel. It would be a spoiler if it wasn't a fake out. Midway through the movie, they're like on a gondola, and Chief and Atari are separated. The other dogs are talking to him, and then they go right into a factory that's marked like slaughter and skin. And the idea, like, I was like, and then the movie just keeps going. Like, Chief and Atari are walking up, like, okay, maybe these guys are dead, maybe not, but I got to keep you going to destination because it's partly a road trip movie. And so for like 5 minutes, there's funny stuff going on, but I was legit unsure. Did you just slaughter 2/3 of the main cast very casually? And at the end of the scene, they cut to them, and you see that every part of the factory is going off like 2 seconds before they pass it. So there's a bunch of that, and then one of them casually goes, I think if this was calibrated right, we'd already be dead. Like that kind of very dry humor.
Glad that stuck with us. I'm here. Can you hear me? I'm talking.
Yes, now I can. What were you saying?
Okay, I was saying that I'm glad that the dry humor kind of stuck with this.
Yes,
film.
I don't feel like Wes Anderson had to sacrifice or compromise any of his quirky style, and I'm sure the budget was not gigantic because Fantastic Mr. Fox in this, they do not go for a very smooth or super detailed stop motion like or like the recent Tim Burton stuff. It gives me the vibe of when you would see like small or foreign stop motion productions just randomly pop up on TV from like the 80s.
It did seem that way.
I'm sure if I looked into it, that might be an inspiration. Like Wes Anderson wanted to recapture that kind of herky-jerky but still artistic vibe. Because the environments you see in this, there's not a ton of detail, but just the way they're constructed and timed are really, really cool, really unique, and it's an interesting little world he creates here. It's not it's not conventional. I'd even say Phantom Menace Fox had a much more conventional world in comparison.
Yeah. Okay.
And so other things, my biggest issue with it, and the main thing that keeps me from liking it as much as Phantom Menace Fox, though make no mistake, I really like and recommend this movie, and it's a personal preference thing. Even though this starts out as very much following this band of dogs, it gradually grows its scope to be. It starts cutting back and forth between the Japanese, the government, and that there are like student protesters who start to uncover like corruption and the truth and wanting to get the dogs freed and such.
Oh wow!
So, but I never felt quite attached to those characters, and like by the time the climax happens, it feels like it's mostly shifted over to them. Like the dogs barely say anything in it, even though they're there. So a bit of a missed opportunity. That said, there's still some great choreography, and it actually got kind of tense. Like by the time it got to the climax, I was like legit, like I know it's faked out before, but I don't know where this is going to go. And I won't tell you. Go see it for yourself. But another interesting thing, because I want to touch on a quote-unquote controversy the movie's been having.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that. But
yes, so, okay, the dogs are all voiced by American actors, because they're speaking English, even ones with small... I was actually a little sad that, like, ScarJo voices one of the female dogs that gets an early scene to, like, play off of Chief, and it's one of the best conversations, and then she's literally gone until, like, the last 5 minutes. I think about how much fun the Meryl Streep wife was in Phantom Menace Fox, and was wondering if she'd tag along. Nope. But... the human characters, all the Japanese characters are voiced by Asian actors speaking Japanese. And it's not even a case of they just stick subtitles at the bottom of every scene. Basically, if it's a government presentation, it cuts to somebody in a booth doing English translation voiceover. Or like there's a scene where like some scientists are researching some stuff and they're talking to each other in Japanese and they print out a consensus that's in English. You kind of get the gist of what they were just talking about. There are a lot of stuff where he's not hitting you over the head with translating everything, because there are some scenes where they're just talking to each other like quietly and none of it is translated. But he's like, I guess his approach was like, I don't want to just force these subtitles 24/7. If it's important, I'll get it to you one way. I'll get it across one way or another. And there's also one other. I'm guessing. So yeah, there are people talking about cultural appropriation or bad portrayal of the Japanese, because the villains are these Japanese higher ups. But at the same time, Atari is like one of the most good-hearted characters, and I definitely get the vibe from whenever they're showing the Japanese populace, they aren't evil. They're just falling victim to a lot of propaganda and manipulation. Okay. And they show they're able to have their minds swayed from that. And maybe the other thing is that they do put one American character in there. It's voiced by Greta Gerwig, actually. She is she's an American exchange student who's in part of a high school protest group. And so she's obviously the human character who gets the most just direct talking. And actually, just a really funny thing, just to show the quirkiness, I was looking at the Japanese cast and I generally didn't recognize them, but there's a scientist played by Yoko Ono named Dr. Yoko Ono, and it kind of looks like her. And so there is actually a scene where the Greta Gerwig character talks to her, and that's where you get the name drop, Dr. Yoko Ono, and they actually have Yoko say a few things in English, because given her history with John Lennon, I would assume she can speak some. And that's just, I don't think there's every reference about her being the same Yoko Ono of our world. It's just, that's how Wes Anderson rolls. Yeah. But I can definitely see how it can be a little problematic to some people. Like that's a justifiable concern. From my point of view, did not seem like there was any sort of slam on the Japanese populace. And this actually does one thing right that we've been complaining about, and people complain about with Kubo, which is let's actually get Asian actors to voice these Asian characters. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Legit, other than the Greta Gerwig character playing an American, and maybe the translator who looked like she might be like Western, I'm pretty sure all these Japanese were played by Japanese or Asians. Yeah, I think that probably will be a movie that I might check out then. I haven't made it clear yet, because I complained about the shift in scope, but I feel like that's a personal squabble more than a movie making or writing problem. I did hear it was pretty good. So it's very good. Yes, and it's kind of interesting to me. I want to try and give Wes Anderson's live action movies another shot, because Moonrise Kingdom has been in my Netflix queue for a while, and everything I've seen about Grand Budapest Hotel sounds up my alley. Patrick recommended it to me, but he's a huge Wes Anderson fan in general. I think he was actually seeing this movie tonight, if he didn't yesterday. I should have asked him for his thoughts, but
Nice.
Yes, so it will be out. Check and see if you're listening to this episode and it's not in wide release, just check online and see if there's a place near you, because there could be. If not, just wait a few more days and go see it. Also, a cool thing. This was I finally used my first Movie Pass ticket to see this thing. Do you know what that is?
Oh, cool. No. Is that the? Hold on. Is that the one where it's like you pay for a monthly pass and you see any movie you want?
Yeah, Movie Pass is you pay $10 monthly subscription. They send you, a credit card equivalent, and you can see one free movie every day. So if you go to movies a lot, that is a fantastic deal. I'm just ashamed it took me so long to do it. But now I think it's time to turn the main conversation over to you, because you also saw a very recent movie. This one, not a, follow-up in terms of just, it's not the same director, but a full-on sequel. So tell me about Pacific Rim Uprising.
How'd they get into our world?
Someone let them in. Someone from our world.
Who is that?
Definitely not one of ours.
Let's do this.
Well, sure, but before I do, did you actually see the first Pacific Rim?
Yes, I did.
Okay, what did you think about it?
I thought it was pretty fun. I agree with people who said the story was shallow, but a blockbuster can be shallow and still be legit, engaging. Because I remember watching that opening. I remember because I reviewed it back in the day. I remember watching that opening scene where it's the two main brothers just quipping bad jokes to each other. I was like, oh god, this isn't going to be the whole movie, is it? And then that brother died, and the movie actually tried to take itself a little more seriously, and I had fun with the rest of it quite a bit.
And you know what? This movie does try and do that just a little bit. Pacific Rim 2 was directed by Stephen S. DeKnight. Guillermo del Toro, who directed the first movie, remained on the film as a producer.
Right.
But Stephen S. DeKnight was apparently he was the creator of Spartacus.
The show.
Yeah. So I'm looking here at the Wikipedia. Yeah, he did Spartacus. That's crazy. Yeah.
What, the Blood and Sand one?
Blood and Sand,
no joke,
Gods of Marina.
My sister used to quote, we never watched it, but when we saw commercials for a while, she would just randomly go to me, Spartacus, Blood and Sand.
Oh man, I did catch a few episodes of Spartacus, and I did like what I saw. Mm-hmm. What Pacific Rim 2 essentially does is of the check boxes what the first Pacific Rim did. It introduces the giant robots in the world that you're in, introduces this hotshot protagonist who obviously thinks he's a shit. And
is that John Boyega?
That's John Boyega. He basically has the film, crash upon his world and shake it just a little bit. But now he's essentially joined by a small girl who is an engineer. She basically builds her own giant robot, her Jaeger. And there are a lot of new things that are kind of cool in Pacific Rim 2, and there's a few people that actually show up from the first film. Let's see here.
I know Charlie Day and that British guy are back because they were the main comic relief in the first.
They absolutely do return. Who also returns is, and this might spoil it for you guys, is Rinko Kikuchi.
Mako.
And she was Mako from
that. No, that's not a spoiler because I think they were promoting that she was gonna return, and that was actually something I wanted to ask you about because my friend Elizabeth, she does a lot of cosplaying, and one thing she did last year was of Mako in her training garb with the staff. So she.
I'm not going to lie to you.
Go ahead.
I'm not going to lie to you. Mako is my favorite character in Pacific Rim.
Yeah, so. I think she was most people's favorite. So, but I was wondering because I wasn't seeing her that much in the trailers and stuff. Is her appearance minor? Does she what's her significance in this?
Well, I'm going to come back to that in a second, and you can tell by my hesitation that it's probably not going to be good news.
Oh.
But Pacific Rim 2, it's essentially more of an action flick. It's essentially, sure, the first one was too, but that one had a lot of had a surprising amount of emotional depth to it. Sure,
there was a lot of downtime for the characters to grow.
Yeah. It was corny. It was cheesy. There were a lot of things that you would probably see on Power Rangers in Pacific Rim, in the original Pacific Rim. However, there was still a deep well of emotion that they were pulling from. The characters felt like they had a little bit more purpose.
They established they both had personal loss from everything that was going on.
Yes. Pacific Rim 2. unfortunately does not have much of that.
I'm hearing people say it's very shallow character-wise.
It is much more shallow character-wise in regards when you compare it to the first one. I did not. I have to be honest. I did not have as good a time as I wanted to.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know what? I on paper it seems really great. They brought back Charlie Day. They did and everyone knows what the plot is with Charlie's character by this point, and they actually have a little bit more screen time with the other robots than what they did in the first one.
Because that was a complaint of mine in the first, where you see all these Jaeger and the pilots briefly, but so brief that when they get killed off, I'm just like, whatever.
Action scenes are a lot more thought out in this one, I have to admit.
Cool.
And I'm not saying that the first one was less thought out, but I'm saying that in comparison,
this is encouraging to me because I like the action scenes in the first one quite a bit.
Yeah, they definitely focused a little bit more on what on making those scenes better. You remember in the first one when the robots were basically drenched in rain and it was nighttime and there's a whole bunch of neon.
The trademark scene of the movie, pretty much.
Yeah, and honestly, it was kind of tough to see some of the action in the first one. In this one, practically all the fight scenes happen in broad daylight without weather effects. So you get a better sense of where the robots are, how the characters are reacting to it.
Now, I will say, does the CG still look pretty good in daylight?
The CG holds up really well during the daylight scenes, and they made the CG artists made absolutely sure that you're able to see up to the minute detail of what's happening with these robots and these monsters fighting.
Take note, Michael Bay.
Yeah, and that's super cool. I have to admit that I had a good time when the action scenes were happening. But it was the scenes that were getting me to that point where I felt a little left out. And that's why I was a bit more disappointing in the first one.
You never felt quite as invested because of the shallowness you're talking about?
Yeah, that's essentially it. I don't want to get too heavy in spoilers, but you're not going to see I'm going to say it right here and now. You're not going to see Raleigh in this film. And that's a giant shame.
Which one was Riley?
Riley was the main protagonist in Pacific Rim 1.
No, I forgot his name, but is he in it at all?
He's not in Pacific Rim 2 at all.
Yeah, because I feel like that was confirmed early on. He was coming back, and John Boyega is pretty much replacing him.
I actually did not know that, and I went into Pacific Rim 2 completely blind, aside from the original trailer.
Had you assumed there would be some sort of passing of the torch scene at least?
I assumed that they would, that him and Mako would at least make some special guest appearances at most, and Mako did, but
not enough.
Yeah, I'm going to leave it at that.
Sorry, Elizabeth.
Yeah, I had a few strikes, but what transpired with Mako, that was the first strike, and it was a pretty big one. So if you're going in Pacific Rim 2, I think you might have a good time, but I think the fact that Guillermo del Toro stepped away from it really kind of hurts the story.
The plus side is, I guess, when he stepped away from it, he did Shape of Water.
He did, and
he won a goddamn Oscar.
He did. So good on him. I do think that giant robot and monster enthusiasts are going to be very well entertained. Mm-hmm. I mean, if you don't hold Pacific Rim 1 too closely to your chest, I do like it though. I think it's serviceable. I think it's fine.
Sounds like the perfect movie for Movie Pass.
Mm-hmm.
The right kind of movie for that. I mean, I'm not gonna. Movie Pass. I was almost going to go see Sherlock Goddamn Gnomes because I had Movie Pass, and I wanted to. Have you listened to any or read any of the reviews of that thing?
I heard about Sherlock Gnomes.
Well, here's the thing, because did you see the trailer?
Yeah.
And that trailer was like a crime. Apparently, because I listened to 2 different podcasts that saw it, all of the really terrible bathroom humor jokes are nowhere to be found in the movie.
Oh, so they only did it for the trailer.
They're trying to figure out where they created for the trailer because the executives thought that would sell more, which it didn't. The movie tanked, and it got bad reviews regardless. But like, people are saying this movie's not as bad as, it's not good, but it's not the epic mess that the trailers promised us. Okay.
All right. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting take.
I would love to, if it ever came out, like what the history behind the changes were, or if they were made with the ads. I don't know, because that still costs money. They still have the actors saying stuff that were in the movie.
Yeah,
Very
definitely.
confusing. But let's not make this an episode about Sherlock Holmes.
Let's get to the main event, shall we?
Oh, but I will say it made me so sad when I saw the director of it was the co-director of the first Kung Fu Panda.
Oh.
It was the one I mentioned who hadn't directed anything before.
Yeah.
But he had done a ton of just behind the work stuff on all sorts of a lot of good stuff. So, but you got to eat.
You do have to eat, that's for sure.
If you're not a celebrity, animation directors are not typically that celebrity type. They can be to us, like I talked about Brad Bird, Mark Osborne, the other director. But yeah,
you got to do what you got to do.
And on that note, let's get into talking about one of the most interesting backstories of a movie I've ever heard, and the movie itself.
Go for it.
Now, if you missed the end of our last episode, I mentioned I had the fun idea to do a theme month where, because we take turns picking the main topic of each episode. So we choose, do we pick a movie? Do we pick a show? Do we pick a game? Do we pick some other series? Do we pick a topic? And I was like, let's have a theme where we talk about something. It can be a movie. It can be any of those things. But it's something that we don't feel is particularly well known. Like, so it can be like a movie that tanked. It can be a show that got canceled or whatever, or just didn't sell well, and that kind of stuff. But like, it may have cult following, it may not, but it's something that has some special meaning to us. And so I let Chris go first, and because you had a podcaster's block last time. You were trying to come up with like a more general topic, but you were like, let's just do this now. And you picked a really cool pick because it actually gives us a lot to talk about. The technically 1989 Japanese-American co-produced animated movie Little Nemo Adventures in Slumberland.
We have been sent here on a mission by King Morpheus, the king of Slumberland.
King Morpheus? Slumberland?
Yes, indeed.
Yes, indeed. Don't forget the present from the princess.
I am not finished. Kindly wait your turn.
Now,
oh boy, here we go.
Here we go. Now, first, Chris, to start off, what is your general history of this movie? When do you remember first hearing about it, and what made it have a second special significance to you?
When I saw it, I saw it like really, really young. So I was about 5, maybe 6 when this movie actually like aired on television.
Yeah, it came out in the theaters and over here in '92, and probably hit videos and TV soon after.
Okay, so I was significantly older than that. So I was about like maybe 10, maybe 9 by the time it came out. By the time it released on the Disney Channel, I had completely missed it in films. Like I didn't realize it came out in the theater, and I was like, oh, this is fucking awesome. like Little Nemo was super, super gorgeous, and this was around a time when weirder, more like experimental animation was starting to show up on cable television.
I missed those days at Disney Channel. Like back before it was all original programming, they could just find some. It could be bad, but it could often be interesting, like foreign animated stuff.
Yeah, there were times when I'd see like Animal Olympics and the Felix the Cat movie,
which we have mentioned.
Or the American Rabbit, where it was just some dumb, fluffy-looking rabbit with big dumb ears.
I have seen it to that.
Oh boy, it is nuts! Some of the stuff that came out.
He has the voice of Donatello. If he runs really fast, he turns the colors of the American flag, gets roller skates, and is basically Superman.
I'm not gonna lie, I thought it was the coolest goddamn thing since Sonic the Hedgehog, and I was so happy about that.
He has some similarities, but yeah. And so this was one of them. And so after that, like, did you ever own a copy back then?
I could only catch it when it would show up on TV, and every now and then Disney Channel would do like an encore presentation, like right after the fact. But I was never able to find it on VHS. I might have like watched it at a friend's house or something when they like picked it up from Blockbuster. But other than that, like I was just like, cool, it's on Disney Channel. I'm gonna rewatch it as many times as I can because I'm going to record over one of my older VHS tapes and watch the shit out of it. And I did just that.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you couldn't find the VHS to buy back in those days, you could tape your own copy.
Yeah, and that's essentially what I did.
No joke, I did that with the Super Mario Brothers movie.
Yeah, and man, this is a beautiful fucking film.
Yeah,
even to this day.
Yeah, I'm going to play a little memory for our listeners here in the final edit because you first like brought up and gushed about this movie. Well, I brought it up because we were talking in our Sonic retrospective. I brought up how, now to make it clear, this was primarily the work production-wise of an anime studio called TMS. And I mentioned, you brought up that they did the Chaos Emeralds episode of Sonic, of Adventures of Sonic, which were really well animated. And I rattled off like some of the American stuff they did work on back in the day. And I mentioned like they were primarily responsible for Little Nemo. And I'll play it, but you kind of said the same thing. Like it's some of the best 2D animation you will ever see. They solely did that movie Little Nemo, which I'm not a fan of the story, but its visuals are wonderful.
Visually, Little Nemo is fucking amazing. Best 2D things I've ever seen.
And I will say before we're not going to get into our full synopsis and thoughts just yet, but in that regard, I totally agree with you. This is a consistently phenomenal looking movie. And I cannot imagine how much every artist put their all into it, animation wise. But so this movie does have a crazy history. Are you aware of any of its history or its inspiration?
I'm familiar with it. Like, to some degree, did Miyazaki work on this film to some degree?
I did some research, so I'll go through things. Are you aware of where Little Nemo originally came from?
Yes, Winsor McCay did a comic strip about it, and it was super popular.
Yes. Now, for those who don't know, like, even if you're into animation, you might not be aware of this and who Winsor McCay is. We actually owe a lot to this guy in terms of the field of animation because he was one of the first guys to start dabbling in it back when moving pictures were a thing. And he actually did I know his first breakout thing was he did a thing called Gertie the Dinosaur, where he would project this like black and white cartoon dinosaur moving around. The idea was it was a stage act where he would walk around in front of it and he timed his action dialogue and the dinosaur's responses like it was his pet. So he'd be like, "Shame on you, Gertie," and she would cry, and then he'd be like, "Here, have an apple," and an apple would show up on the screen. Very cool idea to this day, actually. But before that, he was doing, newspaper comic strips back in the day when they were like a lot bigger and a lot more intricate. And one of these was Little Nemo, which was, I have not full on read it, but I've seen individual things. You can certainly tell by the art style that it's from that time period. But it was still very imaginative. It actually does have characters and elements that were reimagined for this movie. I will say there was one character they left out, and I think you know what I'm talking about. They had good reason to.
You're talking about Flip, aren't you?
No, I'm talking about Impy. Are you aware of Impy?
I am aware of MP.
I would recommend anybody
good choice of them not using him.
Yes. I kind of feel like there's some other side characters they have that are kind of surrogates, but they're basically the idea of the imp was that he was a little tribal fellow, which given that it was the 20s, yes, it's exactly what you think. Grass skirt, those grotesque lips, like this is what Africans are like. Yeah.
This is what black people look like.
You don't see that now for a reason unless it's specifically the parody day. That kind of garbage.
That was a good call not putting him in a movie. Flip was a little
as much shit as we give Japan for depictions of black people. I think even they knew, and at the same time, like I said, this was a co-production, so I'm sure there was something people. But so talk about this movie because apparently Little Nemo in general does have. Like I said, I haven't read it, but it actually had a big influence on a lot of artists back then. So obviously that has been passed down to other artists, even if we don't know it. Like McKay, both his comic and animation work, race him aside, were very important and influential for many artists and works. And so basically the genesis of how this project came to be was, I have it right here. It was directed by a longtime worker at TMS, and it was kind of spearheaded by him. His name was Yutaka Fujioka. I looked him up and he did a lot of, I don't know if he directed anything else big that stuck out to me, but he was consistently working at TMS, so I think he eventually did earn the right to pitch this project. And basically he, not only did he love the strip, but he had a dream, that because of, he could take this thing and he loved the idea of making an international collaboration and hit. Like, we're not just going to make this for us and we're not going to make this with us. This is an American creation. Let's have Americans work on this, write it, help with the animation and writing and music and voice acting and stuff. We'll handle the brunt of the actual animation production, but this can, he legit flew out to McKay's estate to convince his right holders and family to give him the movie rights. And even before proper production kicked off, like he courted a lot of very, very big names, some who did end up contributing to it and some who ultimately didn't. So early on, before production started, because he was trying to get this going back in the early 80s and didn't properly kick off till like the mid 80s. He approached George Lucas, fresh off of original Star Wars, Chuck Jones. Apparently those guys just weren't interested. And then the ones who almost did. Oh, another time we think. So yes, Hayao Miyazaki, who, speaking of our last episode, and another, this is unfortunate, Isao Takahata. Did you hear about this?
I did not.
He died the other day, like yesterday or today.
Oh, what?
Do you know who Takahata was?
Takahata was
the co-founder of Ghibli, and a lot of their great films that aren't directed by Miyazaki were his. Like he just did Princess Kaguya, and I think he was involved with a lot of the Miyazaki's own stuff as well. So it's a shame that. So here's the interesting thing: both those guys and another director I've heard of, Osamu Dezaki, and another director I don't remember. You can actually find, for those first two that I mentioned, they did a little short, and I don't know if this was animated by TMS or Ghibli or others. They did, I think the idea was to pitch it to investors and stuff to really get this thing going. I recommend find these on YouTube and Dailymotion. Very, very different art style. Like they're both
very different.
They're a lot closer to the comic strip. Like this, I actually like the art style of the final movie quite a bit in terms of the character design. Well, I guess we'll talk about more of that when we get to the visuals and the movie itself. But so I don't know why Miyazaki left, but Miyazaki and Takahata split, and apparently Miyazaki's gone on record as saying that he didn't get specifics, but like dealing with people in production was like one of the worst experiences of his career. I don't know what happened. I have no idea because I haven't heard anybody else involved in the movie talking shit about it.
He said in this specific production?
Yes.
Because he's had a lot of hardship in his career.
I really would love. It's been hard for me to verify this because like the original quote came from like a website on the archive.org, so it could be a total BS. But I would love if we just let Takahata, Miyazaki, if you're listening, before you die, tell people what your work with this was like before you decided to call it quits. But no, Fujioka did actually no. The guy who directed this, I didn't write his name, but he generally came from. He was an American, and he did come from a primarily TV background. He worked on a lot of Jay Ward stuff, and a lot of Saturday morning stuff. This was the only, I think, theatrical movie he directed, and then that was pretty much it for direct wise. He died a few years later. And in terms of, now another interesting thing in terms of writing, this was not generally written by people at TMS as far as I can tell. The two big names that stick out to me were Chris Columbus, who directed Home Alone, the first two Harry Potters. Like he's done some crap, but he does have some good movies under his belt and experience. The one that stuck out to me, because it's one of my heroes, is Ray Bradbury was also involved in the screenplay.
I saw, yeah.
Are you familiar with any of his work?
I've heard Ray Bradbury before.
I've read a bunch of his short stories, and I read Fahrenheit 451, which is getting a remake this year. He is phenomenal. He actually did die a few years ago, but his work is like nothing I've ever seen. I totally recommend at least checking out short stories. Like, man, what a mind that guy had.
I also read that two of the 9 old men were.
Yes, I have a few more names. Frank Thomas and Ollie Johnson. Yep. Two of the most recognizable names because they would often work as a pair even after they left Disney. And they actually mentored Brad Bird. They have one-line cameos in Iron Giant and Incredibles. And both that is now. And actually, speaking of Brad Bird, there apparently was some amount of American production involved in the animation side because he worked for a few months on that part.
Oh, wow.
Not writing, producing, directing because he wasn't there yet. This is like pre-Simpsons and that. But he did. Yeah. And last name I'll throw out is... a few more. Brian Frau was involved with the art direction. If you don't know him, he does a lot of fancy art and was the main guy behind the way Jim Henson made Labyrinth and Dark Crystal look. So I have a lot of respect for him. Apparently, the choreographer for videos like Thriller helped with some of like the dance for this. There's a little full on dancing in this. I couldn't tell, but
there's a large dance. I don't want to say large, but there's a pretty significant dance number in this film.
There's a song and there is a dance that is larger than life that I cannot see the music in real life reference for, but we'll talk about them. And the last one, speaking of music, so the people who wrote the songs for this and maybe helped with some of the music itself were the Sherman Brothers, who had a huge repertoire, like a lot of stuff with Disney. They wrote the songs for some of their animated stuff like Sword in the Stone. But they were the songwriters for Mary Poppins, so Supercalifragilistic. That's all of them. And there is one song that very much gives me that vibe in terms of its beat that we'll get to. And so the last thing I'll say about the production crew is, and this might tie into when we talk about the writing. So Brad Bird was, when he was on that production team, apparently he tried asking, I guess he was a little unclear about what the story was, so he asked some of the animators, like, so what's the flow of this plot? And they said, we're just, whatever Bradbury sends us, that's the stuff we're basing stuff off of. And eventually, Brad Bird met Ray Bradbury and asked him, like, where were you getting these ideas? And Bradbury told him, I'm going off of the stuff I see the animators doing.
Okay, that explains a you
It does explain a little bit.
That explains a good significant portion of
yes,
this.
And so last thing I'll say, because we finished the production, you know how I like to say this so and so did this voice and this voice. There are a lot of these main character wise people I didn't recognize. There are a lot of recognizable names, like apparently Nancy Cartwright did a bit part, June Foray, but it's like they must have like one or two lines. I couldn't place them. So the ones I'll get out of the way now. Do you know who played Nemo?
Who played Nemo?
Littlefoot.
Oh, cute! I did not know that.
Specifically the original one. I'm not talking any of the bad sequels. That is the same kid.
Hey, Rabbit. The same kid who played Nemo from Little Nemo and Slumberland, Littlefoot, from the original Land Before Time. She is going, oh.
Okay, now I know she's also a Land Before Time fan. Her tummy hurts. So the two others, probably, I guess, technically the biggest name to mass audiences. Mickey Rooney played Flip, who we'll talk more about. And
Jiminy Jillikers.
We're starting that production. Yeah, he was kind of that guy who just popped up in all sorts of stuff in like his last 20, 30 years of work.
Nothing will get that out of my head when it comes to Mickey Rooney. Just hearing him do Fall Out Boy from the Simpsons version of Radioactive Man, the movie.
Yep. Milhouse, do it for me, the Mixter. No. And the last one I'll talk about, and this is kind of more obscure one, the character Professor Genius was voiced by, I only just now learned how to pronounce his name, René Auberjonois. I haven't seen much Star Trek, but if anybody here has watched Deep Space Nine, he is Ovo.
Oh, cool.
Who is like this shape-shifting character, I believe. I saw like 2 or 3 episodes of that show. But I've actually looked him up. He does a lot of just random pop-up in both cartoons and things. So there's one thing I'll stick out, that one character that I think most will recognize. He was the chef in that one part of Little Mermaid.
Oh, okay. All right, that makes sense.
The guy who was terrorizing. I mean, remember the lyric, "Didn't I shop off of the heads?"
Yeah, that places him a little bit better. I gotta say, man. Like, well, I'll get to the designs in a moment, but continue.
Okay, well, I think we're about ready to dive into. Now, I talked about this beforehand, and now this movie seems to have. Reception seems to be all over the place of how people feel about it from what I've seen online. Some people outright hate it. Some people say it's like a forgotten masterpiece. And some are like me, where I'm going to put my cards on the table. I think it is a fun watch, but the story is and characters are very, very simple. I think it's a better movie to experience than to like digest. But Chris, should we get started on just going scene by scene? Because I think you said you'd taken some notes too.
Just a few. Okay. Only as far as, like what works, what doesn't, like which scenes are my favorite.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
And I just had all sorts of observations. And do you want me just to talk us through piece by piece?
Yeah, let's go through it.
All right. Now, first off, the opening credits, I feel like they could have done a little bit more with what you're looking at. Because it is just like one static color backgrounds with the names written over them.
And, before I get into like certain things that tick me off about this movie, I mean, obviously it's a very fucking gorgeous film. It is a masterpiece, and it is a visual masterpiece in its own way.
Yes.
It is also a product of its time. Now, I hate that line because they can only get you so far in an argument. But for something like the opening credit sequence, this was around the time when that kind of thing was just leaving film. Like you get as soon as films would open up, you see you still had the kind of like old movie. The credits come first, or at least the preliminary credits come first, and you have like the establishing wide, things like that.
Yeah, it's still movies that do opening credits, but they typically are showing something behind it, like some panning shots, maybe an action scene or something with less dialogue.
I think that's a case by case basis.
Yes. Interesting thing, apparently when this movie first came out on VHS in theaters, 10 minutes were cut from it.
I do remember.
Apparently you didn't see the opening credits, just the closing ones, and this song played over the first scene.
Okay. Yeah, I think I do remember watching this like a third time, like not third time, but I do remember watching this when I was a little older. Like I ran into it again, and I was like, I don't remember this part being in the movie.
Yeah. Apparently, it was to achieve a G rating. Because I'll say right now, like, this feels like writing wise, it feels very much targeted towards younger audiences.
There's a definite swing towards the youngsters.
And it's funny because of how much I read people online who remember seeing this as a kid and being terrified by parts of it. Possibly definitely. Including this opening scene.
So the opening scene, we're talking about like when Nemo actually goes on his very first dream.
The first scene to dream. And I will just say we'll talk to the other shots. I will say this opening song, I wasn't big on it when it first started out, but he gets kind of jaunty midway through when I was having some fun with it. And I wrote down the lyrics when she starts the lyrics start going, kaleidoscopical stereoptical dreams come to you. It becomes like a show tune. It's pretty fun.
It was a little much for me, but
yeah. So this scene, they don't really set up Nemo himself ever, really. Here's the two things we can glean about Nemo from this scene. Maybe he does have a lot of wonder for the stuff he's seeing, and he really is interested in vehicles and mechanics, which is touched on a few times. And you notice in his room he's got a bunch of mobiles of like old school planes and stuff, because from what we see of the real world, this is set in the same time period the comic strip came out as, like probably like the 20s or something. Mm-hmm. So he's just dreaming, he's just sleeping, but it's still in his dream. And there's a lot of it in his dream where he thinks he's in the real world, but it's his dream world. And his bed just starts flying. The windows open, and it just starts floating on into the night on its own. He wakes up and hears an owl, and he's confused at first, but then he sees if he touches part of the banister, he can steer it. And this gets him really excited, so he just starts flying through the night sky. The music gets very jaunty, and Nemo's main phrases that you'll hear if he's excited is a lot of "yippee, whoa, this is." Yeah, it gets old fast. I'm sorry, Littlefoot. I wish there was a lot less of that.
That was hard to take after a while. I was
we'll be coming back to it. But one constant is the visuals are spectacular.
Have you I remember I watched this recently, and when I watched it, I was like when I watched it, there's three versions of me watching this. There's the 9-year-old version of me watching this. There's the slightly older animator. There's a slightly older but still just a kid animator version of me who's like, I want to see if I can draw that one day, and I know
just starting college.
Will. Yeah.
And then there's you now.
Then there's me now, who's more like, okay, this is what I'm getting now.
Yeah,
the animator in me looks at like these fine details, like getting like the detail in the bed when Nemo touches like the banister of it or whatever the hell that thing is, like the line detail on that. That's painstaking.
Like
it's mind-numbingly deep.
I went and looked at some other stuff that apparently TMS was involved in America that I hadn't heard of. They did this one 80s show called Galaxy High. But it got canceled really quick. And looking at that, I think I realized like what really sticks out to me about their American, like their best work is that, because we're talking back in the 80s. This was when you still had to do it all on paint physically. You didn't really have computer assistance, and it's very customary for anime and other cartoons this time, like you get those kind of rougher strokes and such. This looks clean as hell line wise.
Yes,
it must have been so meticulous by guys who knew what they were doing, and because that is actually a pet peeve of mine with the older animation. I like the cleaner stuff that we get in like digital 2D such. Not so much of an issue here.
No.
And the fact that they're keeping this bed, like keeping it on model when it's swinging and turning all over the place.
It still looks like a solid, believable piece of work.
Yeah. I'll have more praises about individual animation moments as well. And so so we're talking about like stuff that scares kids. This starts very whimsical, and then it gets like before it gets scary, it gets like otherworldly, where like he comes to this ruined city.
Yeah.
Apropos of nothing, which I'll be saying quite a bit, but it's lovely looking and it's kind of eerie but beautiful. And he's even commenting like, I wonder what this deal with this building is. And then there's this clock tower that just suddenly swings to midnight, and bam, the power goes out of his bed, and he starts falling like a rock. Down this building. And a lot of cool shots of like a lot of full frame animation of the skyscrapers swooping by him. And then this homicidal train appears.
This giant train that comes out of nowhere off the side of a building underwater.
And it seems dead set on running him down.
Yes.
He's like, it's bumping up against the bed. I think eventually it like shatters and he flies through the air, and thankfully he sees his house in front of him. So he runs up a dock, and the train decides to reenact the trailer's role and embrace Godzilla and like tear up each plank right behind him. And it's actually kind of weird. He opens up and you see the back of his mom just doing like an egg beater thing very silently.
Oh, that is some straight up Nightmare on Elm Street shit.
Yeah, and he closed the door screaming, "Mom, the train!" As if, I mean, it's a dream. Maybe his mom in the door could have helped. But so the train smashes through the door, he flies through the air again, and then thankfully he wakes up on the floor, like he fell on bed.
Seeing that as a kid, like, it wrecked my shit a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's a part of me that was like, I'm so down for this movie.
I feel like this is the main part that I can justifiably say this might be a little scary for young kids, because there's some other things people have issues with in the middle and the end. I think that's a bit more tolerable for kids, but this is an intense note to start on, and it's even stranger that it doesn't really have anything to do with the rest of the story.
I mean, it kind of as far as like the story, like the plot is concerned, it's kind of like it's kind of left field, but it gets you invested in the fact that Nemo is in a dream that is lifelike, that is fantastical, and it's fucking dangerous.
Yes, because we're established, like probably like 95% of the movie is his dream, but I guess it's definitely to establish that he has a vivid imagination, and it does come back to flying bed for the climax. So there's that.
Yeah, it does. But I think honestly, like even though the dream sequence doesn't have much to say about the story,
it's fun to watch
in and of itself. Like it's very fun to watch, and I honestly think it's kind of smart to play it that way, even if it doesn't have like, say, like King Morpheus or the Nightmare King showing up or anything like that.
Nemo is literally the only character in it. Yeah,
and that is smart, but I also think it's to the detriment of the film, and I'll get to that a little later.
Yeah, and I will say, yes, I complained about him like peeing at the moment, but when he's like screaming in terror, like, oh, I'm like, yeah, that fits.
I felt that.
I'd be right there with you.
Like, yeah.
Imagine them in the big room booth. Littlefoot, scream your heart out. Imagine your mom getting murdered again.
Poor Littlefoot just can't catch a break. I swear to God.
His tummy hurts. So I know it's funny that I've heard people say like they can't really feel invested in the story because it's a dream, and that's not the case for me. It's more that's just simple. I actually felt that way because we get so little of the real world. Like when Nemo's parents appear, it's like the parents in Coco. I'm like, whatever.
Yeah,
I'm talking about specifically the parents. The grandparents are the focus of the living relatives in Coco.
Yeah, honestly, I feel invested in the film no matter how many times I watch it. Mm-hmm. But I also think that there are certain things that are problematic in this film, and the fact that there's a good bunch of people who have different mileage as far as what that is. We need to go into it a little bit more, but
well, let's keep going.
That's the famous Neil Gaiman theory of if someone can't point it out, then something's wrong.
Yeah, and the main thing is that these scenes do establish is that you kind of realize that this is kind of a Wizard of Oz situation of both setting up characters and conflicts that will be expanded on his dream, because he sees a circus parade in town, and you realize after you've seen the movie the first time, every character gets like a focus shot in this parade has an analog design-wise in the dream. The crazy thing before this is we meet Icarus, which kind of breaks the reality. Because literally everything else in this real world is, plausible in our world. And Nemo happens to have, I guess, I don't know if it's a pet or a friend, because he lives in a tree next to him, but it is a flying squirrel with Rocky goggles that talks like kind of a cross between Gollum and Abu. Like a lot of it is, blah, 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 but then you can recognize Nemo. Oh no!
See, here's as a kid, I thought Icarus was like the greatest fucking thing in the world.
But you're not a kid ananymore.
I'm not a kid anymore. So when I see Icarus and I hear him talk and I see just how much of an influence he has on this film, which is not very much.
No, he does not need to be here.
I kind of went back and I watched them, and I kind of went back and I read through. I read about the comic. I read about the comic.
He was not from the comic.
He was not from the comic.
This is 100%. I'm sure this was Disney does sidekick. Let's do a sidekick.
Yeah. That's essentially it. And you know what? Some scenes he's in is hella cute. Most scenes he's in not so much. But we can continue though.
There's also the voice for me too, like just a very annoying. Blah, 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 Oh, it's very rabbitish now that I think about it. But no, okay, so he goes to the parade, and I don't know what motivated the ringmaster to be like, I'm going to ask this random kid to get on my horse and ride. But it was nice of him. And actually, there were a couple times I did laugh out loud. And the first one came from the ringmaster is doing his, boys and girls, greatest shows. He doesn't literally say greatest show on earth because P.T. Barnum's estate would sue their ass. But he holds up his ringmaster hat, and Nemo cheers, and he starts flailing Icarus around like a noisemaker,
and swinging him around.
And Icarus does not have it because the next shot he's lying there exhausted. He looks like he's like fucking hungover. Like, oh god, that took a lot of me. So Icarus does provide some laughs involuntarily. So the main thing we get here before we get to the dream thing is he wants his dad to take him to the circus. His dad's like, maybe next day, which is more inconsequential than you would think. But the other thing is, so we get this scene where he sleepwalks, and I guess the idea is we're supposed to assume he kind of has a history of sneaking snacks from his pantry or whatever, and so he's involuntarily just going out there to steal a pie. His mom wakes him up, and he's like, oh shit, and he goes out there. And there's the part that spells out later, this is kind of, because there was that piece of paper saying, remember your promise. Like, I guess he had told them, I won't take food anymore. And the main dream conflict stems from a much crazier version of that.
Yeah, the scene where Nemo sleepwalks, that was one of the scenes that I missed when I watched it as a kid. Like, either it wasn't shown or I don't know.
I feel like I read that was cut out, and that feels, you probably shouldn't have cut that because I think he still mentions it at the end.
I don't remember where he mentions it at the end, but
it's literally the last thing.
It's seriously like one of those things that threw me for a loop when I finally saw it, because when you sleepwalk, you kind of don't know where you are. But Nemo sleepwalks, he knows where the pie is, opens his eye to look at the letter.
It's a little confusing because there are parts that make it seem like he's awake and faking, but I do assume that he was genuine until his mom started to snap, because he's all woozy, like, wait, where am I? What have I been doing?
And that's one of the weird things I noticed about this film when I read about what Winsor McKay actually pushed into the Little Nemo comic, is that he actually knew a little bit about like dream logic, and one of the things that he was definitely afraid of that he put in the comic was like fear of falling, fear of drowning, and all that stuff. Wow. But he did a little bit of homework, and I kind of feel like that the creative team here did not do a little bit of homework in regards to sleepwalking.
I mainly noticed dream logic in terms of transitioning between moments, and we will get to them. So he goes to bed after this for proper, and this is where the main plot kicks in. His window. He lets Icarus sleep in his bed. I don't know if his parents are okay with that. But his window, like, it starts glowing outside and busts open like he's going to get a close encounter. But instead, like, these officials are like hopping in, like up.
Yeah, these weird clown men.
Most of the inhabitants of Dreamland are clowns, basically.
Yeah.
I did notice in one crowd shot there was a random cowboy.
Yeah. It's weird.
It's a dream.
Yeah, it is a dream, and that excuse can only go but so far.
Yeah, but I can't apply it to everything, but I can apply it to these weird denizens.
But the weird thing is that, I'm not going to say weird, but this film is super well designed. So when it comes to like the festive, the crazy, the amazing childlike wonder of Slumberland, like, that shit was down packed as far as like Winsor McKay's comic is concerned. Like, there's like some fantastic shit that goes on there.
They had a lot to draw from.
Yeah, and I'm super okay with the clowns, honestly. Like that's not what kind of
they aren't scary looking clowns, at least.
No. They're super friendly.
They're pretty goofy looking.
And I'll go one step further. When I was a kid, there is a certain clown named Bon Bon who had a big crush on Bon Bon. I am not going to lie. I was like, is it a girl? Is it a boy?
It is. I think it's voiced by a girl. I actually, when I heard her, I thought that was Nancy Cartwright. Because it sounded like a high pitched part. It wasn't. It was actually, I'll say right now, it's an actress named Sherry Lynn who did voices in Tenchi Muyo.
Oh, that's cute.
There are a couple anime actors.
She did Tenchi Muyo? Oh my god.
She was Sasami and Kioni.
Oh,
and actually, another deep cut. Nemo's mom is Ayeka.
Oh, that's cute.
I had no idea if you had knowledge of Tenchi, so I wasn't going to bring up until
I did. I did not know that, and thank you for bringing it up.
Yeah, so apparently Nancy Carter was another one of those, because there are a bunch of like basically Bon Bon clones on the side, like especially when they're waiting for Nemo to meet the princess. I think she was one of them. It was a very small role. So they so there's Bon Bon, there are these chubbier clowns, and there is Professor Genius, who is basically the stuffy right-hand man of the king.
So, Professor Genius is... He's someone.
You mentioned too. He is one of the more forgettable characters for sure.
I love his design. And I'm gonna gush about this movie's design like all day.
These characters, both the designs are good on their own, but they just because I'm talking about these are great animators. They are constantly very, very expressive, and not in an over the top way. It's a believable man.
Like, I love how Professor Genius looks with his top hat and like his long, lanky, slender body. And like just the way he walks and the way how gentlemanly he is.
Yeah, it's funny because so many of the people of Dreamland are so fun and fanciful in their nature, and he is the one who's stuffy, playing by the rules. Like at one point he pulls out a stopwatch. Like he might as well say you're late because he's the White Rabbit.
He might as well. There is a specific scene in this movie where and it comes much later, but I'm going to go ahead and say it now. Sure. Where Nemo gets his weapon and he scares off these monsters with his weapon. And Professor Genius is like, aha, they're afraid of the weapon. And he gets up and he puts on his top hat and he's like, we haven't a moment to lose. And that shit makes me so goddamn excited. I don't know why.
His one moment to shine. Because
moment, and it makes me so happy seeing him so determined.
Yeah, and that after I mentioned Rene Auberjonois, while he does a good job with what he does. He actually, I ended up skipping Awesome Con this year, and I found he was at it. And
oh, wow.
I would have loved to ask him about this movie because it makes me sad because I watched this documentary I've been bringing up. Apparently, he's not only a fan of the strip growing up, but he's actually really happy with the movie itself. He thought it was a really cool thing to be involved with.
That's cool.
So I'd love to ask him like the process of reading for that and if he had any funny stories about it. But
that's really cool. Yeah, I would love to.
And actually, even though I've said I don't care much of this character, his introduction gave me another laugh where the clowns are really excited and he's like, hey, show some dignity, and then he immediately walks into the mobiles. Like totally ruins his own moment.
I love that.
I wish there was more of that because the rest of it is him like being run over by stuff, not even his fault. So basically, the reason they're there is like, okay, so Nemo, King Morpheus has selected you to exit the Matrix, and that's what Slumberland is. It's the real world. No.
Basically. But it's basically that.
It's Nemo's fantasy world. But basically, he has for whatever reason he has decided you've been appointed as my daughter's playmate, and you're also going to be groomed to be my heir to the throne.
Which is accurate to the comic book, at least as far as the playmate part of it.
Yes, if we're talking the characters, the King and Princess were characters. I think Professor Genius was an amalgamation of some of the characters, and Nemo and Flip were characters.
Yeah.
And there might be some background ones who were from the comic as well. I'm not, like I said, I don't know that much about it. So Nemo's response to this is both funny and like this is how you step Nemo, where he's first thing he says is, "Wait, this princess is a girl?"
His princess is a girl. I'm like, you idiot.
Yeah, even Bon Bon, your crush. She goes, I mean, she's a princess. It comes to the territory. Nemo's like, I don't care. She's still a girl. I'm not interested. But apparently, thankfully, they know the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. Because they're like, well, see, the princess made these cookies for you. And Nemo's response, oh, well, I love cookies. Now I love girls. Let's go.
I love girls. I'm like, wow, that is the shittiest little boy I've ever seen.
He doesn't come off as shallow in the rest of the movie either. This is a weird way to attract him to this.
Yeah, I'm not going. She's a girl. I'm like, don't you want to have fun, you putz? What's
like,
going on?
There's more to that than being with a girl. I mean, because, well, okay, you know what? They also get him interested by seeing their dirigible, which he says multiple times. You have a real dirigible? I'm sure there are a lot of kids who learned that word because of this movie.
Yeah, definitely.
And so they let him. So he and Icarus comes along too. I think because I'm pretty sure like Icarus is like it's his Abu. He's always like, "Come on, Icarus, you're coming with me." Oh, okay. So they get on. And a little bit of foreshadowing because they let him take the wheel for a second. I also like he gets way too excited. You see guys with like glasses of orange juices flopping around the back. You're like, gosh, shit. So there's a little foreshadowing, but it's also, I guess, somebody pointed out it's kind of timely that you chose this because a few weeks ago a podcast I like Cartoon Lampoon did an episode on it, and one of them pointed out. So there's your first tease of this idea of Nightmareland. You know, the main villainous force, which makes sense. It's a dream. So you see these glowing red eyes for a second, which we later established belongs to the villain, which we later established is imprisoned at this point. So, look,
how does he get? How's he out there? Who knows?
I don't think Dream Logic applies to this. I think.
I mean, I'm guessing if we're going to use Dream Logic, that perhaps that's not really him. Maybe that's just some rogue nightmare.
Yeah, it would have been smarter than to show when we finally see the Nightmare Army other guys with those eyes.
Yeah,
that's the only way this makes sense.
That would have been a little bit more consistent, but you know what?
Either way, it does establish like, there's some sinisterness to this world, and we'll be, that's our Chekhov's gun. We'll be more of that.
Yeah.
So where's the next? So he's taken in, and we get this, big parade of like clowns and balloons and people like flipping out like, "Welcome Nemo."
Before we get to that, I want to hone in on the fact that the captain of this dirigible is like, "Well, hello there, Nemo. Would you like to fly this giant ship holding 400 people?
Wow, yes, sir. I'm pretty sure Nemo legitimately says Jeepers when he first sees.
He's like, Jeepers, I sure want to kill all these people.
That's what I'm talking about. God. We're lucky that the most that happened is some guys spilled their glasses. I think Icarus also gets like a steam blast in the face. Like he should be dead.
God. And no one says anything. Like there's no self-awareness here.
The captain does take the wheel back when he sees the nightmare. It's like, that's what it takes to make him go, okay, hang on. We get to Nightmare Land, and so they do a big dramatic, all right, let's meet King Morpheus, and, throne's empty, and Professor Response is, not again. So, and when we meet the king, you understand why. But this is actually where, it's not technically the first time we see him, because he pops up for a second when, on his bird, and Professor makes her stay away from that guy. We meet my favorite character, Flip.
So you was invited, and now he stood you. Huh? What luck you have, kid.
You're Flip. You're a frightful fellow.
You got it. I'm frightfully funny, frightfully friendly, and I can make your dreams come true.
Flip is a douchebag.
Flip is a giant douchebag.
But he is also my favorite because I talk about how, for kids, very wholesome this is. Flip just seems so over everything about the nature of Dreamland. Like, he's constantly saying to Nemo, like, they're making you do this. I guess actually you have to have fun.
Flip is a genuine piece of shit who kind of plays by his own rules.
Yes.
And there are some real problems with him. And I kind of like the fact that I do like the fact that he's in his own bubble when it comes to.
And there's at least the fact that everybody else acknowledges he's a huge piece of shit.
Yeah.
It's not like they're going, you rascal. It's like, no, this dude's a fugitive.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, design-wise, there's a bit of a problem with the green-faced clown
yes,
going on. But
he does come off to me as a white guy, but they probably could have made his makeup a lighter tone.
Besides that, I'm actually okay with Flip, but I'm not okay with how the movie kind of just lets him be him. And him and another character are actually kind of the prime examples of what I have an issue of the issues I have with this movie.
Okay, we'll just say right now, who's the other character you're talking about?
The other character is Princess Camille.
Okay, we're right. We're almost there. Okay. But yeah, I like how both times that Nemo's in the middle of something and Flip is literally just lying on a ledge, looking chill as fuck, and just being like, "Oh, so I did that to you." Thankfully, when he's trying to, he's almost like a Rolex salesman because he's going like, "You want to buy a map?" But
he is a total used car salesman.
Total con man. Yes, that's especially when you realize he knows the insides of the underground of Slumberland, shady dude. But thankfully, he does an early fuck up that I don't think the movie would have a happy end if he hadn't. Where he's like, "Hey, look, I got a map too." And Nemo goes, "Nightmare Land," and Mickey Rooney's this straight. There are a bunch of Mickey Rooney. I'm convinced was having a heart attack doing his dialogue for this.
Yeah,
and Flip is really well animated with some of his expressions too.
He's probably one of the best animated characters.
He's really fun. Yeah, he's really fun to watch. As shitty as he is, a lot of his scenes are the most entertaining for me. I also will note he, at least in the first half, flies around this giant crow, and I am concerned for this crow because every time he talks, it sounds like it's on the verge of death.
Yes, it does. I'm like, this bird is dying.
I feel very bad for it. He abandons it later on too. But every scene, it's like, all right, come on. He's like, okay, let's go. It does not sound like a crow. It sounds like a man in an iron lung that is malfunctioning. But yeah, so he shows, this is where we start getting, I'm talking about the transitional stuff with dream logic. I think he's actually saying, I know how to help you find the king. So he opens a secret staircase. They go into this huge room that is upside down. All the furniture's on the ceiling. They have to carefully step around the rims of the door. It's dangerous, but it's pretty cool. And Nemo falls, but not to his death, but down this crazy ass staircase.
Yeah, and it's shit like that. It's animated shit like that makes looking at it. It makes you forget you're watching drawings. You're watching one drawing.
Yeah, so many of these. There are a lot of specific shots where they're the full environment is moving and it looks incredible.
Yeah, there's a lot of really good inspired shots that take from the comic and actually make
The stairwell is from the comic. Yeah, I've actually remember seeing that.
And it makes fantastic use of the medium of animation.
Yes,
this movie is a great example of it.
Yeah, I feel like if nothing else, watch it for wonderful visuals and creativity. Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, it's all right.
Don't worry about it. But and I will also say, comparing it to another movie with a crazy production, have you ever seen Thief and the Cobbler?
I have. I did see Thief and the Cobbler. Yeah.
So there's a brief stairwell case in that is like almost a 1-for-1 with how it moves, the swirling and like jutting up and down. And I'm betting Richard Williams was heavily inspired by Winsor McCay.
Oh, definitely. I would not think of any other way. That's
another movie
sure.
with a thin plot, but some of the best animation you'll ever see in your life. Maybe I'll pick that someday. So thankfully, this stairwell he falls, he slides through a hall and lands in this Victoria room, and this is where we finally meet King Morpheus, whose design I would say is Santa Claus if you dressed him as Zeus.
Yeah.
He's in a conductor in this, but you realize the king he loves his toys and his vehicles. And this is another thing I love about, because, Nemo just not much to him, but I love the fact that his introduction to him is showing his love of mechanics too, where the king's like, I don't get what's going on with this. Nemo just immediately goes, have you looked at the piston gasket? He's like,
piston gasket.
Yeah, and they start doing a thing, and then he gets to Icarus, piston gasket. Yeah. And then I remember Icarus is there and go, oh, great. But he fixes it, and they go on another really cool animation thing, which is like a joyride on this thing all over these rooms, ending with the death of Professor Genius in the real world. Yeah, that's what you get for being the trying to play by the rules in Slumberland, I guess.
Yeah.
And so that happens.
He's still alive. Nothing happens, guys.
Yeah. Spoilers. Only one character dies in this, and it's not any of the good guys. Shocker. Mm-hmm. So this is when we get okay. So this is when the big MacGuffin first happens, where he's like, okay, we're gonna start going you through the training to be the king, the heir. I'll introduce you to the princess. We'll get your training, but first, here's this really, really important key, which looks really badass. It's like dragon shaped.
Yeah.
But memo to King Morpheus, because he says it is super important you don't open this door for the good of everybody, and he was like, I promise. Memo, say why. Say what is behind that door, because that is exactly what Flip uses to his advantage later on to fuck everything up.
Mm-hmm. Now, on one hand, as a kid, you kind of just leave it alone. On another hand, you kind of want to be like, well, it's a dream, so logic doesn't go too far.
I'll bet it could make a kid more interested to learn more about the door, because I'm sure even they know, like, okay, we're going to revisit this thing. Wonder what the big deal is.
This is one of those things where I'm like, you might want to follow up and say what's behind that door. I won't want to know if there's like 100 murderers behind that door, and you're just like, don't open it, because I want to open it. That could be murderers, or it could be cookies. I want to know what's behind that door.
We'll talk more about that. Don't worry. So the next scene, I have a lot of things just to say about this one scene from. So it's like, okay, time to introduce you to the princess. He's brought up in this elevator run by a caterpillar. Like it's like running crank going, here, we're here. Just a quirky little touch. Mm-hmm. One thing I do like, and I've actually seen it in some other movies, including we talked about, is the Vesper's briefly like, okay, your hair's a mess, let's try and get that right. And he gets it all slick, and it immediately pops back, and Nemo's like, yeah, sorry, that's not happening. I can sympathize with that, because Nemo basically has my hair, now that I think about it. Mm-hmm. But I've also that's the beginning of Paranorman, too, because you remember Norman's hair sticks up, and he tries to come down, then...
Yeah.
And same thing, the beginning of, I don't know if you ever saw Tintin. That's one of the first scenes.
I did see Tintin, yeah.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that someday, because Tintin has that quiff. In the first scene, he walks by a mirror and tries to comb it down. Nope. It's like, don't mess with the trademark hair. So he walks in. So 2 notes about, before we get to the princess as a character, so she's being introduced as she is playing a harp and singing some song about Slumberland, which apparently in this documentary, they used reference of a harp player to get the hand movements right. Like, to actually make sure she was playing the right strings.
Smart.
But not so smart is this is clearly like a 30-year-old woman doing this singing. And then it's like, hey, princess, she's here. And twist to like a 10-year-old girl. Oh, hello.
As a kid, I did not notice that.
I guess a kid wouldn't.
As a 33-year-old man who was kind of fed up seeing the giant flower over above her head as she's playing this harp, I was like, shoot me. Shoot me this
here's
movie.
The other thing about her actual voice, this kid, is she starts out super British. Her first line is something like, yes, you may go, Professor. And she just drops that shit.
May I present little Nemo?
Oh, yes. Indeed you may, Professor. It's just that no one has ever accepted a royal invitation in his underwear.
Cute. I think Serena noted that when we watched
but
it. When we watched it together.
Again, going back to Lapida, it comes back every like half hour or so because in the last 30-40 minutes she goes to Flip. Were you smoking a cigar? Like I don't know what happened if the directors told this kid not to do it, but they left some in. But I was just every time it happened, I just wanted her to go, "Hello, governor," and then Rippy from regular show has nightmares.
That's terrible.
But so because I know you're talking about this character, like I like her intro scene because as it starts out, the playmate is no, I just want to fuck with you at first because she makes Nemo totally think like, oh, I looked down on you, you're in your underwear, you brought a rat, and he's angry about it, and then she admits, no, that's not actually how I feel. But that was funny.
she totally plays a tsundere in this specific scene. Like I kind of don't like the look at you. You look like a piece of shit.
Yeah.
How dare you bring you and your rat into my lovely abode?
Rat. That's how she's playing.
Yeah. How dare you bring your stank ass self in my lovely abode where clowns are fucking gossiping like cherubs.
And Nemo's rightfully pissed. He's like, okay, first off, these are pajamas, not underwear. And second, you just came to me in the night and said, let's go. Like, what'd you expect?
Yeah.
And that's when
she is super rude, and he is like, don't apologize to me, apologize to my rat. And
now Icarus is pissed off at both of them. And we decided to spend a minute, like Icarus climbs up fountain, was like, Icarus, I'm sorry, which I feel like they could have cut the scene up before that.
Honestly, I think that entire scene is entertaining. Like,
actually,
it sets them both up very well. And you know what? Afterwards, they have a fucking ball. Like they go out on the town.
No, actually, before we get to that, because I know you mentioned the princess was another character you had a problem with, and I want to know why, because I had one as well.
Okay. So all right. So we're not at that scene yet, but we're basically getting there. But my main beef with Princess Camille and Flip is that they're not utilized with good story sense. And I know that sounds super basic and super vague, but
no, because that kind of ties into. I kind of disagree with Flip because they do some fun stuff with it, but it's like I would have loved more of that like playful ribbing with her and Nemo throughout. But she's like she becomes just kind of totally straight faced the rest of the movie, and
totally like she other than this scene, she is totally unused. Like there's a
she
scene
does deck flip pretty well later on.
Well, and that was neat.
But that's not enough for the whole movie.
No. That was a neat moment. And anyone could have decked Flip. And it's nice that someone decked Flip, and it's nice that she decked Flip. Yeah. But anyone could have decked Flip.
Yeah.
And the problem with this film is that it kind of just leaves two of the most appealing characters doing nothing for most of the film. I mean, sure, Flip has something to do, but
Flip still has comedy.
Yeah, he has comedy, but then someone steals it, and we're going to get that. We're going to get to who steals his purpose a little bit later on.
Okay, but you're talking about there's another. I guess the first full-on musical number, even though there's nobody on screen singing it, but just a montage of all the kind of zany, fun stuff you do in Slumberland.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say the start of this number gave me my biggest laugh in the movie. I don't know if it's intentional because it is smash cut to them in a chariot, Nemo and the Princess in the back. In the front is Icarus and just some realistic frog randomly going,
You know what? That of all my problems with this movie, that shot melts my fucking heart.
I love it. I don't know what that frog's purpose is. He doesn't come back, but it is fucking funny.
It's just that scene of Icarus and the frog screaming.
Oh, because Icarus is like happy. The frog is stoned face. I should just put the audio in randomly in this episode.
Please do.
I actually do think I saw an image that the frog is something from the comic. I think it's just a minor Easter egg. But it's still super funny on its own.
I mean, Gertie shows up, so that's an Easter egg too.
Yeah, Gertie is there. But so the crazy thing, some crazy stuff happens in this where like they go in these balls that bounce through the sky. My main thought being, I hope none of their heads collide while in these balls. But it's a fantasy, so you're probably fine.
Phrasing. All right.
Okay, no. I'll phrase it. So at the end, it starts raining, and one cool thing is they put on like these butterfly wings that guide them over here. Now there's this crazy shot where it's like their clothes hanging on the ground, and no child nudity in this. This isn't the Christmas tree, but like they're wearing like cotton over their bodies.
It's weird, but you know what? It's also really fucking fitting.
It's
like
the Slumberland equivalent of towels, sure.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, this entire scene of them just having fun in Slumberland is so fucking innocent and cute and fun, and
genuinely
I love it.
Whimsical.
It's times, it's scenes like this that build me up to think that these characters are having a good time and they're bonding, and so they'll actually have like real shit happen to them and have like actual conversations later. And the movie doesn't do that.
I will say, I thought about reading this, but okay. Now, first off, I said this in episode 2. Look, if you have not seen this movie, you literally have no excuse right now because it is. TMS has put it up legit for free on YouTube in HD. Mm-hmm. No rental, no thing.
We're gonna spoil the shit out of it, so I'm sorry.
I mean, it's not just that. I'm just saying you should go give this a look. Like, if you don't like it, early on, fine, turn it off. But like, this isn't a case of, oh, I don't have Netflix, so I can't watch it. Oh, I don't have $4 to spend on YouTube or Google Play. No, it's just there. Go watch it. If you don't like it, turn it off. If you like it, watch the whole thing. But one of the top comment on that page is regarding the clothes stuff, and it is one of the creepiest sounding YouTube comments I've ever read.
Okay.
And I will leave it out to not taint this episode. If you're curious, go read it for yourself.
Oh no. Okay. So let's take a look, see why you're still talking then.
Oh, well, I'm going to keep talking, and then I'll hear your reaction. It'll be Voltron 3D all over again.
Okay.
So one weird thing pacing-wise is that, like, right after this scene, we get a brief moment of, like, even them just talking while admiring the view, like, yeah, this is a fun place. Then he goes to the backpack house, and we immediately start another song.
Yeah.
The Etiquette song, which you can definitely remember that's the song because the main lyric is, you've got to get some etiquette, something, a billion times, which I was not sure if I was going to like this song at first, but it gets crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
it does get crazy.
They decided they're going to teach him all the proper manners in like one session, and so he's just jumping from people were like a bunch of guys who are like, all right, slurp this soup, and then every time he does something wrong, they clear their throat. So he's like, all right, elbows off the table, no slurping. And then some other woman grabs him, this chubby lady with huge tits who's teaching him to dance, and he's like getting caught in her cleavage.
That was fun as a kid. Even as an adult, I'm like, I'm not sure if this ages well, but I'm sure it's still funny.
I do like the fact that every time he's thrown away from her, you hear him gasping for air.
The gasping is funny.
And like, there's some fencing guy, there's some librarian, and the best part is at the end, like, they all just come on screen at once, and they're like so overwhelming him. There's a point where like one of the guys comes up with tea, and they end up giving it to like the horse rider. He's like, oh yes, thank you. Just a lot of, and then like the whole set collapses, and none of them seem to react.
No, they don't.
And it's not a case of cheapy on the animation. I'm sure that was just for
it's
sake.
Not. It's like even though, all right, so this entire musical segment is done to death. You've seen it before many times over. Even in the 1980s with animated musicals, you've seen this scene before, where you have a character that's a fish out of water, and you have the uptight, the educated,
they all come off as very snooty.
Who must teach this young chap how to be a gentleman. You've seen this shit before like 100 times. So
I think
nothing.
It's the plot to Princess Diaries.
Yeah, it's not too original.
No.
But at the same time, it's also super fucking fun. Like, I can't stress.
Yes, like I say, when it first starts and they're just showing people singing, I'm like, oh, whatever. But then like they just start showing, like, the fact that like Nemo's kind of transitioning from each one doing the last thing, so he's still going Barry, thrust, Barry, and then this librarian dumps like a bunch of books on him. It's one of the better pure comedy parts, I'd say. But so after this ends, we get the return of Flip, and again, just sitting on a ledge, being like, yeah, you're not enjoying that, are you? And for once, Nemo agrees with him, and Flip decides, all right, let me show you how to have fun, and his idea is being a criminal.
Yeah, being a legit criminal is fun. Yeah, okay.
Tricking the police into beating each other up, setting off a bunch of fireworks, and I assume injuring some people. Making Gertie sneeze so she drops a tent on people.
Yeah, going through, and this is when. Okay, so there were a number of cracks that have started to show by this point in the film, and they were all pretty forgivable, and we've noted them by this point. But the one glaring one, where I felt that they were kind of stretching, or they're kind of reaching a bit for what they needed, for what the scene needed to be, was the Scooby-Doo alleyway chase.
Yep. They went there.
And I'm looking at this, even as a kid, I'm looking at this part isn't very funny. And as an adult, I'm like, you didn't need this.
You didn't need this.
You didn't need this.
Maybe they had done some, like, so I do like it when sometimes if you do it, they put a crazy spin on it. Like if the same person comes out of two doors at once or something, like just surreal for the sake of it. It's a dream. They could do that, but no.
It's a dream. You can basically do whatever you want, but at the same time, like, audiences have seen this before.
Yeah. Oh,
especially American audiences.
Yes, I will say in the beginning of this scene, one little nod I liked because it's a little bit of establishing Flip's character more is he sneaks to the police station. He's like, "Oh, this is my home away from home." Like he has been arrested so many times, all the wanted posters are of him.
Yeah, that's a testament to his to that
douchebaggery.
Well, that particular individual, yeah. So you can tell that in this entire sequence of events that Nemo is having fun. Like of all the shit that people hate Flip for, this guy knows how to have fun.
Yep.
So
I'm going to assume for the story's sake he didn't actually hurt anyone.
No, and I'm hoping that's the case. Flip,
because if not, Nemo, you're an accessory to murder.
Yeah, Flip is about as he's about as selfless as fucking Jack Sparrow as far as this movie is concerned. The only problem is that he really doesn't have the depth to pull it off.
He doesn't really grow or anything.
No, and that's my biggest issue with practically every character besides Nemo. But even still, there's a couple of scenes coming up that actually shows just how great his relationship to Nemo is. And
you mean Flip?
Flip has a really good has really good chemistry with Nemo.
He does become. I do get the sense he's generally fond of Nemo. He's not like you're an accessory to my crime. He's like, I wanted to show this kid how to have fun.
He's fond of Nemo, but even when they disagree, and that's probably one of my most favorite scenes in this movie. Like, you can tell just how much of a piece of shit that he is, and that even though he likes Nemo, he's not afraid to throw him under the bus.
Oh yeah, we'll get to that. So the end of this, like this flea is like I said, Flip knows ways into underway passages. So he gets there, Nemo like slips on his tongue. They find themselves up against this crazy intricate door. Which Flip is actually unfamiliar with as well. But then Nemo recognizes this is that dragon shape for the indentation. He's like, I think this is the door the king was telling me about. And Flip was like,
you don't say.
Flip has to be that devil on their shoulder. Like, maybe we should sneak a peek.
He takes one long look at it. He's like, yeah,
let's open it.
You're right. Let's open
very quick. And of course, Nemo starts out like, the king said we shouldn't. But of course, Flip has to, like I said, because the king was specific. Flip was like, that if he's saying keep it a secret, there's probably something really impressive and cool behind here. Like, who knows?
The king's trying to take you down the side of righteousness.
The king's kinds of cool stuff for me. Let's just sneak a little peek.
And I'm going to take you down the path that rocks.
Yep. And this is where he's the worst influence because he fucks everything up. Granted, I will say, from a technical standpoint, what they see is fucking awesome. It is some of the best 2D effects animation I've ever seen in my life.
As a kid, I don't think I've ever seen like 2D animation like that before, and I'm coming off The Little Mermaid.
The closest comparison I can make is Hexus and Ferngully.
Definitely.
But this is like even more. It's this puddle because it doesn't have a face to it just yet. It's this pile of shaking, sentient, almost like tar. This slime with some like thickness to it. One catch I loved is that you can see little like glowing parts in it, like these little crimson lights.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of to add to the sensation, like this stuff is alive.
It's this weird amorphous kind of like definitely oily.
Yes, very sinister.
Alive kind of goo that's just swimming and boiling and pulsating.
And you realize it starts to move, like it's reacting. It's become aware, like, oh shit, somebody's opened the door, somebody's looking at me, and it starts to move for them. And naturally, they freak out and mostly close the door. And what is Flip's response to helping? Gotta go. I hear my mommy calling.
Yeah, he bounced. Like, he's gone.
And so Nemo's like, the door's not fully closed, but I gotta get away from this thing too. And
he tries to get the key, but he can't.
Yeah, it was too tall. He had to stand on Flip's shoulders.
Yeah.
And so thanks, Flip.
And that's I mean, a lot of people. Okay, so there are problems with this movie, but I want to note just how smart this scene is, because not only do we go from a wacky Scooby-Doo chase and fireworks and making dinosaur sneezes
to the first sign of a real threat.
Yeah, like everything from the color tone to the music to the way that the camera follows Nemo sliding down this wet cavern into the door. Like, it sets up this moment that these guys, throughout all they've been through, they ran away from cops. That's a big deal. But they crash into a door and basically come face to face with some kind of hellion monster. And this is when shit can get kind of real, and Flip dips. Like, this
what's his out?
And the fact that Nemo has to stand on Flip's shoulders.
If they had made it where like Nemo just ran away too, when it was just it could just stop there to close it, that would be a huge nitpick. But it's like he wants to close it, but he can't do it on his own.
Yeah, and it also underscores the fact that Flip was the one who helps Nemo up to do it. Yep. Nemo can't even correct his own goddamn mistake. I love that so much.
It is a smart touch, and the fact that like the movie could have 100% blamed on Flip later on, but Nemo is, because the rest of the movie, like, I did agree to this, I gotta make this right. That is a cool little thing for Nemo. He doesn't grow much, but I like the fact that he has that responsibility. So let's keep going, because
we're getting into my favorite scene. This is when the movie peaks for me.
The coronation.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find my notes here for it. Yeah, Nemo he gets there, and obviously the professor's like, dude, you're late, hurry up. And they put him in this royal guard. He looks like a Nutcracker prince, honestly. And, we get this very formal. I like that when it opens, he looks so nervous, and he just goose steps for a little bit, like, because he just has no idea to look formal. Yeah. And so he gets seated. Camille's there in this other very, formal robe compared to the rest of the movie. Icarus sitting with her because he's cool now with her, I guess. Oh, and so the king shows up and does a little speech. There's a nice little touch where, because he mentions the key, and Nemo's, who's been able to get caught in the moment, like you see him glance at his his neck where the key would be, with a really horrified look, like, oh shit.
Yeah, the way that he does that is that he clutches at his heart. Like directly. Like, not only has Slumberland become so fucking dear to him that he clutches at his heart first, but that's the trust that the king put into him.
He's both broken the trust, and he has no idea what's going to come out of this door, and that's legit scary to him. For all I talk about this movie story being inconsequential, there's some good buildup of tension in this.
There is.
Because you're juxtaposing how jolly the party is with this gradual, this thing's getting free.
Yeah,
and Nemo's the only one who knows.
Don't get me wrong. There are some real story-breaking problems with this film, but the build-up to the main conflict of the story,
really good,
fucking brilliant. We're about to talk about when shit goes down.
Yes, before we do, I do have two funny asides I noted about the jolly part, which is Nemo's sitting, because this is when the introduction of the scepter. I guess it's this ancient artifact that only the royalty can use, and it has the power to keep peace and whatever. So the king introduces it by doing this incantation we hear a lot more of, which is Pajama Zatanna, Jazama. So he shoots this beam into the sky, and at first it looks like this, it kind of was imposing. Even Nemo's like, what's happening? And it looks like a portal's going to open. I'm like, oh shit, Loki and his army are going to come out from the sky. What have you done, Morpheus? But it actually just causes some more light shows, because hell, Morpheus is going to put his enemies in danger. And
I actually thought that shit was pretty fucking badass.
It looks cool. Yeah, no, it looks cool. I'm just saying, if you don't know at first, you're like, what is going to come out of this? No, it's just for show.
Yeah, 20 different things could come out of the chapter.
But then he gives it to... Okay, no, first what happens is... So they start doing a really boring waltz. For whatever reason, Professor Genius gets really hyped. And so he runs to the crowd let's live it up, come on, party! And you see the band shrug and go, all right, faster. And we get this really well animated, because Morpheus joins in, because obviously he's the bigger, kid at heart, and so he joins in. Really well animated, them doing this goofy dance. But I will say... I get the feeling that the voice actors were told to just improvise whatever they want over this. And so some of the dialogue is Heidi hoo hooty and digga 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 dinga. Really crazy, just gibberish to the rhythm. And the other thing is, so Nemo and Camille are sitting on the thrones, and he's still looking super nervous. Everybody else, she's just enjoying the party. And then Flip, being the bastard, sneaks up to his side because he snuck under a woman's dress to get into a party. And he sees the scepter, check this out. And Nemo screams, don't touch that. And the British just turns oh, did you say something? He just screamed at the top of his lungs. Yes, he said something.
Yeah. So
And she's like, "Hang on, let me put my hearing aid."
That Heidi Ho scene in coming up to this particular part. I've noted how amazing the animation is, and this is, and I'm not kidding when I say this is where the story peaks for me, because it absolutely does. And that kind of weird scene when Professor Genius, for no goddamn reason, just starts.
Yeah, I don't know what motivated him, because before he was just like tapping his toe. Something happened in between cuts.
He was, I think, as high as his fucking hat.
He took some ecstasy.
He just goes fucking bananas, and the king's like, I want some of that shit too.
King makes sense.
But watching the film as a person in the audience, I'm like, I don't understand what's happening. And you know what? I kind of want the scene to be over, because
the dance goes on way too long.
This goes way too long.
And they just keep, and like it, because they're building up, they're ratcheting up the tension even more with Nemo stuff, because he finally decides, fuck it, I need to go try and close this door on my own. And I like when you have a tense thing where somebody's running off and somebody else is like, what's wrong? Because Camille has no idea what's happening. It's like, what's the matter? Like, it just kind of gives you that vibe, like, they have no idea what's coming.
Yeah, and part of me doesn't buy the fact that Camille doesn't know what's going on, because she comes off as kind of smart, but the movie doesn't allow her to be smart. And
part of to do much of anything after this. But I can buy this aspect. Like, there's no, because he and Flip are the only ones who know what's happened.
Sure, but
anyway, but okay,
what I'm trying to get at is that before him and Flip are going fucking bananas. Man, this is what, and this is the part that kind of gets my goat about Princess Camille, is that when the king is like, this mighty scepter can only be entrusted to, and
Nemo.
Of course it's Nemo.
Yes, I know.
But it's Nemo, this chump kid who came out of nowhere, who no one met.
And we never say why you picked him.
Never say why you picked him. Yes, it's a dream, but you're the audience member going, but your daughter's right there.
Yeah, raised from birth and royalty.
For birth and royalty is a princess, and now she's relegated to playmate. So
I half expected someone to bring it up, but then Morpheus goes, "Oh, a woman leader? This is a Japanese movie. Get real."
Oh boy, yeah, that's an American thing too. I'm sorry to say,
true.
And it's such a goddamn waste. Like,
yeah, they should have touched on this some more. They barely do in the scene after this. We'll get to that. But yeah, so let's get to. So we finally see what happens. This ooze gets loose. Tons more great animation. Like, you can see when it's climbing up those stairs, it makes little hands. Looks really cool, and it's legit. Like, I've heard other people say this whole scene scared them too. For me, it's mainly one part, which is like Nemo's trying so hard to get through, and then he runs to the exit door, and bam, it just comes out like this wave, and he immediately has to turn back and know, like, I'm too late. This thing's out, and yeah, it bursts the lights. People are screaming and running, and it's like, I'm not going to fight your kingdom. I am going straight for your king.
The way it shatters the lights, like, and I'm gonna go full on animation nerd here, because the lights explode in twos, and then like they kind of like stay exploded in like a nice swash of in betweens and ones. So it's just like you see the debris off the bulbs just kind of like stay there for like half a second.
A nice little otherworldly touch.
Yeah, it like something's bad. Like the light from this world is extinguished.
Yeah,
that's how bad it is.
The colors get very gray and stark because no reason to be jolly here. And yeah, apparently kidnapping so let's just get through. This is the king of nightmares. Apparently imprisoned by some point, but he is. Yeah, I guess he is somewhat of malice and discretion, and I guess meant maybe to demoralize them. He takes Morpheus and warps away to his home. And people are freaked out. The professor's like, what the hell? And the princess is crying, and all the crowd is just like, what just happened? And I should note, Nemo's trying to get the scepter to him this whole time, because I think he realizes like this could help, but fleeing crowds gotta get in the way. So the king is taken, and people are like, Nemo, how'd this get loose? And Nemo's like, well, Flip kind of motivated me. And Flip, being a piece of shit, like, no, this is all Nemo, guys. All Nemo. And this is where we start getting the weird transition. Are you still there?
I'm still here,
This is where we start getting some of the weird transitions between sections, because the crowd is like, they aren't pissed, but they're just trying to like let it sink in. Like, this is Nemo, because they're standing Nemo over, like, Nemo, how could Nemo be responsible for this? And he's freaking out. And then he wakes up in his bed. but he is still in his dream because this is one of the weird dream logic thing of just chunks of the movie. He'll fake wake up in his bed and then go back to the Slumberland. So a couple things I want to note because he hears the king's like ghostly voice screaming for help, and unintentionally funny part, he goes, "Hey, wait a second," and picks up the sheets and looks down where his legs are. Oh, it's the scepter.
I'm with you.
They could have gone in a very different direction that I would not like to have a 9-year-old boy involved in.
Oh yeah, no, it's. I'm just now reading that comment on YouTube, and I'm like, oh boy.
Oh, that's from like 20 minutes ago. But yeah, wasn't that one of the skeeziest comments you've ever seen?
Yeah, this is weird.
I'm not going to read it. If you're really curious, go on YouTube for yourself. But wow,
that is a boy. You put that out. You put that out there, friend. Okay.
Yeah.
So before we continue,
sure.
The scene when Flip and Nemo are arguing about the scepter. They're basically exchanging blame. The king's gone. Everybody's
before the kidnapping.
I'm talking about like after the king is kidnapped.
Like, okay. Oh yeah, they are kind of going. You did it. You did it. You did it. But Nemo, but Flip is
that shit is for me. For me, that is the most brilliant part of this film. Only not just because of the performance, but how everything has ratcheted up to this point. It showcases what kind of person Flip is, and like it really sets it in stone.
Fucking spineless.
Yeah, we already knew that Flip was spineless. We never knew how spineless he was.
He throws Nemo under the bus.
Not only does he throw Nemo under the bus, but everything he says is fucking true, and Nemo knows it. And
yeah, Nemo is not without blame. He agreed to.
And everyone wants to hate Flip. Like, Flip is not a good guy. He is not a good person. But Nemo just wrecked the kingdom on his first night.
Yes, his paradise has been ruined.
And the only thing that he had to do was basically just keep his hands to himself and not touch the door.
Yep.
And he did whatever he wanted to do. Seeing that kind of character exchange where they're pointing fingers at another. This is one point. Flip, like, he's so passionate to like not be the guy in this situation that when he points at Nemo, his hand fucking shakes, and I love it.
He's probably terrified.
He is terrified.
And we'll actually get to, because they still do blame, and we'll get to what happens from that. So, but so this is one of your favorite parts from a character perspective.
It is the move, and this is and by that point, that is the highest this movie ever goes.
Okay, I guess we'll have some issue. I will have some issues with the comes next, but I'll have some good compliments as well. So we get this is a pretty crazy transition, but it also drives home the metaphor because he goes down and he hears the king's voice and sees that pantry with "Remember Your Promise" thing, and it flashes the key. Mm-hmm. This whole dream was motivated by him breaking a promise in real life. And then for some reason, the pantry explodes and floods everything. I don't know what that connotation is. It's a cool visual. It's pretty intense. But so here's another confusing thing. So instead of drowning, it washes him into like this big, pretty looking but desolate ocean. And he comes across the professor floating on like a briefcase. So you would probably be assumed to think that the kingdom is falling into further ruin. But so they do have a tender part where like the professor still does not want to blame Nemo for this because he just likes him too much and hates Flip too much, and Nemo has to drive like, no, I'm partially at fault here, so I gotta try and do what I can to fix this. That is probably my favorite thing about Nemo as a character, is that he does man up.
I do like the fact that he realizes the damage that he's done, and it happens pretty organically. And he's only fortunate. The way that the story makes it believable is that these events look so goddamn horrific that you can't help but, if you're a decent person and you know you're to blame, you can't help but want to fix it.
Yeah, he has come to love this land, his friends there, and if he knows there's a possibility to fix things right, he can. And it is worth noting, like when that favorite scene you talked about, he's not, at that point, he's just going, no, over and over. Like, he's not trying to fess up or blame, he's just panicking.
Yeah.
And by this point, but when he first gets to the ocean, that's when it sinks in. He like cries a bit. He's like, I screwed up.
Yeah.
It's a nice little quiet moment.
Yeah. What I don't like is the professor basically not saying anything about it either. Like, he's still like, Flip you didn't do this yourself.
Well,
Flip
he doesn't say anything.
yourself.
When you see him kind of look kind of downtrodden when Nemo says that. I think he just doesn't want to admit to himself that Nemo fucked up because he's so fond of him.
And you know what? Sure. That's a sure with a question mark, because you only just met this kid yesterday. Like, this isn't like Luke Skywalker that shows demonstrated his amazing abilities or anything like that. This was just some punk kid. The king took off the street just because he's so goddamn cute.
Yeah.
And as a person, I would like to have seen the professor as a person react a little bit more realistically, instead of being like, oh,
from this point, the professor and princess don't provide anything of worth.
No. And that's my biggest gripe with the movie, is that these characters don't act like people. They act like NPCs.
Yeah.
They're just there to be like, here's the plot. We'll follow you. Good night.
And so I think we should keep going. It's getting pretty near your bedtime.
It is.
And so we should get through the last. We got about half hour left. So the confusing is, Nemo remembers, like, he asked, do you know where the Nightmare King went? He's like, he has his own realm of Nightmare Land, and Nemo remembers that accidental map. Like, Flip has a map of where this thing is, and Professor points out, well, we're about to exile him into space. Because he still took some of the blame for this.
Which is pretty badass, I'll give him that.
But so what's confusing is they're like, all right, we gotta get back to the kingdom. Paddle, paddle, paddle. While Icarus is going like, 1, 2, 1, 2. So they get back to the kingdom, and I'm like, so what was the professor doing a mile away from the kingdom in the ocean? I think that's just part of the dream logic.
Well, he didn't know that Flip had the map, I guess.
I just mean, why was he in that location? Like, why was he still not in the kingdom?
Why was he just thinking that?
It's a cool environment. It's a nice environment to have that more solemn talk. But it's another part where, like, a dream logic transition just raises some more questions. And that's just... we're about to get to another one that I think is more cool. So, touching on... So, it does seem like the princess is ruling in her father and Nemo's absence and doing fine with it. Which, of course, kind of adds to your point, like, why can't she have a part in this? So, Flip's exile is going to be they're stuffing him in a ball and shooting him into space. And I like the fact that they're trying to put a blindfold on him. He's like, no, I want to see the show. Like, he just not seemed that upset about it.
He doesn't seem that upset until they put the cannon on.
Yeah, when they put top bull on, he's like, hey, Philip, what you doing? Hey. But then Nemo shows up, is like, no, let him out, and says like, all right, give us the map. Flip's comment is, do you have the map? And he's like, oh, how much you want for it? And when he tries to give it to them, and he starts trying to walk off, but they're like, what is it? She's like, oh, it's in my secret code. Only I can read it. It's like, oh, well, then you're coming along. To be fair, if I would Flip, I would say, let me make a translated copy for you. But I guess there's no time to waste. So
he's not that bright, but yeah.
No, and I do like that his one caveat is, okay, but you make me captain. And really all that amounts to is that he has the steering wheel and yells to himself, 2 degrees east, aye, aye, captain. Like, he's in his own little world. So it is, going off this rescue journey is Nemo, Icarus, Camille, Professor, and Flip. I don't know whether about any soldiers, but I guess that probably would have just cluttered things even more, because it's not like these characters do much outside of Nemo. But what happens is Flip, being a piece of shit, falls asleep at the wheel, and they get sucked into this whirlpool. But as it turns out, instead of just going to the bottom of the ocean, it plops them into another land, which I think is that's a cool dream transition, I think. Like a fantastical way of the physics working. And hey, Flip did get them where he promised. But I love that when they get out of the water, he looks at his map and it's just the ink is soaked up. He's like, uh-oh, what? Nothing, follow me. And he just refuses to come off like a buck up. And so this is where they're camping in this forest, and they're remember. Oh yeah, these creatures from the Black Lagoon show up for a second to try and, like, I guess, eat the princess. And I really like how these things are designed and animated. First off, they're really, like, sinewy and like curved. Their
entire design just makes it feel like creature from the Black Lagoons. I don't think that was accidental there.
No, and I wish they came back in these other demon scenes. I really like their design. But this is the proof where, like, when they're trying to help her, he swings the scepter and they freak out. And that's what we talked about, where they're, especially that, like, revolution. Like, now we know this thing will definitely it's anti-nightmare. I don't know what the thing's history is. Like, they don't explain it because it's a dream, whatever. But this is now, like, the most important item to hold on to. So they're having a campfire and trying to remember. Okay, so there was that incantation you got to do it, and they're like, so how'd it go? And Nemo does point out, okay, well, I'm positive the second one was pajama because we had a whole argument about mine. And so Flip is, being a grump and like, I remember he's trying to fake recreating the map off on his own and doing a very poor job of it. And this is where he meets, this is where you're talking about the characters who kind of usurp his role.
Yeah.
The boomps.
Yeah, the little shape-shifting goblins.
I'm not a fan of these guys, I gotta say.
I don't think any sane person who likes this,
like, their core concept is cool, where they can kind of shift into these blobs and combine to be one guy or like a tree, but they're just goofs. They have these annoying over the top voice, like, "Oh, hey, Nemo!" They're just a bunch of them yelling over each other. Their song's very boring.
As a kid, I really liked their design, and as I grew,
they do have fun design individually, yes.
And as I got older, I actually was pretty inspired by their design, and that's actually how I came up with Cham's original core concept from my film. Like in the original Pumpkin Cham and Pie on YouTube, Cham could turn into stuff, and that's essentially what I was pulling from. Later, I was like, maybe that's not such a good idea.
Yeah, well, I wish they had more stuff to offer beyond that. Technically, the story they do, because they explain through a song, they were exiled from Nightmare Land because, oh, you're a nice nightmare, get the fuck out of here. But since they've lost the map, they're like, well, yeah, we can show you where this thing is. And I love the fact that there's a little exchange where Flip is like, what am I supposed to? And Emil is immediately like, you're fired, they're hired, and he's like, but then what's my role here? You carry the luggage.
Yeah, no one really had. The Professor and Camille, and by extension Icarus, don't really have much of a role in Nightmare Land.
All Icarus does in this is this annoying screech to get. I don't know how he knew this, but it's just as annoying to me as it is to them. Where for 5 seconds,
they all kind of they're there to get captured. And Flip honestly had the most to gain.
And now that's gone.
But he actually could have grown into like a more likable character, or rather a character that could have at least helped turn things around. But he really did was just kind of get them there, and he's still a piece of shit. So they gave the role to the goblins, and they were like, "Bye."
Yeah, we'll be helpful at least. Yeah. So, but almost immediately after this, so they're in this creepy forest, and I remember because when they first are at the shore, we get their first glimpse of this badass flying manta ray thing.
Yeah, that's a cool
design, well animated, very creepy because manta rays don't fly, and it's kind of a monstrous shade and proportion to it. So that's that's our letting us know like, okay, the enemies are going to find out they're on the way, and that does explain what happens next. Where when Flip is wandering off on his own, this whole army of like kind of diversely designed bat monkey things show up. Like some of them are bird-like, some of them are sinewy, some are straight up bats. And is another scene I remember.
Some are just bats.
Yes. But I just remember, apparently this is another scene that creeped out a lot of people because they're being pretty vicious. Like, they're throwing people all over the place. They're like scratching at Nemo. It's almost like they're out for blood. They're out for capturing everybody. Thankfully, Nemo fake wakes up. Don't know how that works, but he's trying to remember the incantation too. There's his most common dialogue for the rest of this climax is like just like variations on that gibberish. So, but he wakes up while they're like cornered him. And okay, I forgot to mention because I do have a slight history with this movie as a kid, which is that I wasn't aware it was in theaters, and apparently did have a very limited release, but I saw some like newspaper magazine ads for it and rented it later, and the one thing I remember is it got to this point where he wakes up like, oh shit, but where's the scepter? And then like falls on the ground. He goes, oh, whoa. And I think for whatever reason, my mom came in, we had to turn it off. I can't remember the specifics because I was like 5 or 6, but I think it was just in case we had to go somewhere, and then we had to return the tape to Blockbuster or whatever, and I was legit bummed that I never saw the rest of the movie.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. But thankfully for Nemo, and thanks to the dream logic, it's not just him and Icarus now. The booms pop up from under the bed, and for no goddamn reason, their friend they were looking for earlier crashes to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just like kind of pop up in his room. And I'm like, oh, you guys again.
but then this extra one crashes the ceiling for no reason.
Oh, and you brought a friend.
And this one, I mean, he kind of made me laugh because he looked and sounded like he was totally trashed or exhausted something because he lied on the ground like, I'm so happy to see you guys. Like he might be going like, oh man, I love you guys.
Oh, did you? I hated him too. Like they're all super cute and adorable in some ugly way.
Design-wise.
But this guy is just. I want them to go away so much.
Yeah,
and now you give me
smart. Nothing they say is funny. Their voices are annoying.
And now you give me a bigger, slower one to deal with.
He sounds like he sounds like Big the Cat.
He does sound like Big the Cat.
But Though the plot reason he's here is because, like I said, they were all on the run. I guess he was left behind, but he was able to, while Morpheus was captured, pass on a note to him, which is the full incantation. Because I guess before Morpheus was put in hibernation, as we'll find out, he knew this is the only way to defeat the king. Weird reveal here, because Icarus starts screaming. I have no idea how he knows this. He's like, no, if Nemo says his spell, he'll die. And I'm like, how do you... Did we miss a scene?
Yeah, that's oof. It's falling apart. Like, this movie was falling apart like right after.
All right. Well, thankfully, a lot of what happens after this, I have more positive things to say about, because
sure.
Call back to the beginning. Nemo's like, all right, I don't have other people here to get me to this nightmare land, but I remember my bed can fly, and you guys can guide me. Let's go. So the bed starts flying, and they go through like a sky portal, like, because I guess they're guiding him. It's almost like a Neverland thing, like just follow that star, and then this rift opens up, and they go through there. And gotta say, Nightmare Land looks pretty badass.
Yeah, it does.
The environments for this last showdown are really cool and creative. It's dark, it's foreboding, but there's some extra stuff to it. Like they bounce off these pillars that like glow with rainbow light as feedback almost.
Yeah.
Some interesting stuff, and like they're going through these very narrow areas. A lot more of that we were talking about, like the full frame where they're going through these tunnels, looked amazing.
Yeah.
And so now this is where we finally do see the Nightmare King, or as I call him, Chernabog from Fantasia, wearing a cool robe with bigger teeth.
Everyone says that.
He does look cool, and I like his voice. It kind of sounds like Megabyte from Reboot.
Oh, his voice is amazing. He is a cliche fucking villain, though.
Give me the scepter, Nemo, and I'll let you go. Answer me! Now, Nemo, I'm losing patience.
Well, he's barely in it, so...
Yeah.
And he actually does... Some of the stuff he finally says in the final showdown I do like, but we'll get to it. Because we get this scene briefly, the army that had kidnapped everybody else... there's this one, like, I guess, leader. I like his design because he feels like out of a Disney afternoon show. Like, I could see him being a villain today in Gummy Bears or something.
Yeah.
And he's going like, all right, we did it. And he straight up does a Heil Hitler sign, pretty much.
Yes, he does.
Hey, the Nightmare King! And like,
I'm
Japan.
Like, oh, that was necessary.
Yeah.
Good job.
But there is a cool moment because that manta ray shows up and whispers to him, and he's like, no, Nemo's alive and on his way, and he flips out. And he has this power to like summon wind and like absorb people into him.
He fucking black holes them, and the only thing
it's creepy.
The only thing I could yell was, the Nazi got swallowed by the evil he worshipped.
There's a lesson to you neo-Nazis. Watch this scene.
There's a lesson to you out there.
So we get to the final showdown where the king finally does. Once they get there, the king not only tracks them down, even though like the Booms knew this room that's like a little hidden passage. They're like, yeah, he won't know where we are, and so the king, to draws them out, shows the captured side characters. They're in these tubes or like hibernation. So it's Flip, the princess, professor, and the king. And he's been a dick about it. He's like, what do you think of my collection? Like, and he does this creepy thing where he holds his finger to Camille's tube and is like electrocuting her. And that's what sets Nemo's lid off. He's like, stop it! And he's like, oh, now I know who you are.
Oh, so that's where.
Yeah. And so, but Nemo, because he lowers the king without a tube as bait, and Nemo comes in like, I got the scepter, and then bam, the tube comes up, and the king's like, yeah, you thought it would be that easy? Fuck off.
I know this villain is cliche as hell, and he's not really that motivated.
He only has like 3 minutes of screen time, but
but he is petty as shit.
Yeah,
and I love it.
He has a physical princess. There's some cool things he does with abilities, and I love the fact when he's finally talking to Nemo, he is just a big bully. He's like, just go run off to mommy, and like Nemo starts trying to remember the spell, and like he's like, oh yeah, pajamas sure are scary. I think at one point, like, because he can teleport his hands, and for no reason he just comes out and like brushes the back of the big boom, which really skeeves him out.
Yeah,
like he is just relishing and fucking with these people.
I kind of love it.
Yeah, and so we do get so we get this fight. It gets pretty violent because he finally yelling the incantation and he cuts that ray in half. Like blood and guts everywhere. That thing is dead.
That shit is great, and it exploded in like 1,000 pieces.
Yes, and the king still doesn't get that. Nightmare King still doesn't get that first, but then Nemo blows up his hand with it, and then he gets pissed. So he starts doing the black hole thing you're talking about. And this is the other part. It gets kind of intense. Like the Booms and Icarus reenact the end of Pikachu's rescue adventure, where they one by one cling to each other, and the big one is Snorlax holding them all with his chain. I will say the least negative positive thing about this is audio-wise, Nemo is screaming the intonation the entire time. So we get like 5 minutes. Though,
yeah,
what?
But it's incredible.
It's incredibly what?
Degrading.
Yeah, it's a shame. That's one of the one things I remembered about when I skimmed through this movie the first time on YouTube. Like, I like everything about this except for Nemo and the boom screaming the whole thing. Great scene to watch on mute, though. But I will say I laughed at one point where he just this really anguished pajama. And so the last moments actually get intense, too, because Icarus is, like, holding onto the staff, trying to get him to read it. And then he gets thrown off and sucked into the black hole. And Nemo gets freaked out, but he manages to save the last incantation. And bam, the king gets lasered out of existence. It looked like it hurt too. His face distorts in this last crazy scream. And thankfully, because he's gone and he's sucked up his demons, his influence fades and then everything becomes actually very pretty and serene looking. And things get very quiet for a moment. And then, of course, we do get a fake, oh, is Nemo dead? And I'm like, because everybody, he's just unconscious. But everybody set it loose.
But we got to play it up.
Yeah, so Icarus and the princess are all crying, and the professor's like, "Oh, poor boy," and I'm just like, check his pulse at least, guys. There's kind of a nice thing where the king just walks over. I think it's a cool juxtaposition because he's been so jolly this whole movie, and he isn't mourning or telling everybody. He just walks over very quietly, like I saw him, and just picks Nemo up, and it turns out the scepter, because it's Deus Ex Machina, can heal him, I guess. And he wakes up, and Nemo, of course, his first thing to do is apologize about all this. But the king's looking on the bright side because he's like, the process of this is that you did vanquish the Nightmare King. We don't have to worry about him anymore.
Yay, good. And that,
which
but
I gotta ask, what would have stopped you earlier from getting a battalion, opening the door, and yelling the incantation to kill him before he knew what was going on?
Yeah,
I know the answer is we wouldn't have a movie, but we bring this up a lot. So then we get to the wrap up, which is a little big. I guess they just decide Nemo's going to go home. I don't know, because he's still. I guess he's still Canal's prince because he gives Flip his punishment, which is that you can't smoke cigars anymore. Because Flip has had cigars the whole movie. The granted, before he does, Flip has a fake out scepter he uses. Then he smokes it. And I swear, it looks like he's lighting the biggest joint in the world.
It would have been, a little bit more entertaining.
Yeah, it's kind of a throwaway scene. Flip's farewell, and I'm convinced he killed himself in that because he starts coughing himself away.
Oh, he's dead. He's legit dead.
Mickey Rooney's got that, and when he first sees the booms, he puts his hand on his heart and falls over. And I'm like, oh, Mickey Rooney's death preemptively caught on film. And so that's Flip's exit is losing his favorite thing with Crow following him. Come back. And the booms are welcome to the New Miner too because they're just doing this goofy dance on. I wonder if that's where the Michael Jackson guy was left in. So they get a nice kind of more panoramic thing because I guess the princess and the dirigible escort Nemo home, and he was like, "Yep, there's my house." And Princess is finally getting smoochy. She's like, "I had a great time." He seems really nervous, and the moment he kisses her, bam, he wakes up. And my last laugh of the movie is both that when it pans Nemo in the bed, he's still doing the smooch position, which looks pretty goofy. And his mom wakes him up saying, "Oh, thankfully you didn't fall out of the bed this time." So I think we're supposed to assume the whole night he was asleep, falling out of his bed and getting back in. And his parents were like, "What the hell is going on with him?"
Yeah, they're just fucking watching him.
And this last scene is totally throwaway because he apologizes about the pie, and his mom doesn't seem to carry it over. It's like, oh, yeah, that's all right. And then his guy comes in and is like, okay, we're going to go to the circus. The last line is Nemo going, hot dog, we're going to the circus, Icarus. The circus! The end.
And the movie ends.
That's the note you end on?
That's the movie, guys. That's the movie.
That is the Nemo, yes.
Not a sense that these things actually happened or something like that. It's just like, oh, he apologized for the pie. That's okay. Let's go to the circus. The end.
Moving on.
Man, it was so fucking anticlimactic the way it ended. As a kid, I was like, that's it? I'm making my own sequel. And I would run around the house.
They should have. I wouldn't have minded if the opening had a little more time devoted to his modern life to set up some conflict. Yeah, maybe they could have had a better payoff at the end.
Yeah, that would have been nice.
But that is Little Nemo, or as I like to call it, the death of Chris's childhood. This episode.
Oh, I wouldn't say the death of, because I did enjoy it, and I actually, and you know what, I have a lot of issues with this film.
Yeah,
but
we've discussed them.
Yeah, but I actually love it. Despite those issues, I don't think it's a narrative masterpiece. I think it's a visual feast. I think I think visually it is amazing. You can learn a lot from it.
If you are an animator, I do think you owe it to yourself to watch this movie. Maybe watch all the parts where Nemo is screaming on mute, but it's just, yes, constantly, these animators gave it their all.
Yeah, like every scene looks like even the throwaway scenes, even the scenes where that don't really like provide much for the film, like you can excuse me, that came off awful.
You get to the hiccups, that's the best part.
Hiccups. Even the throwaway scenes, they're animated very well. You can learn a lot from watching this film as far as character performances, how the play around work perspective.
Yes.
Even like there's so much to gain here.
Like I said, I praised earlier, all the characters in this are very expressive and very lively without going too over the top. Generally, it's just these TMS guys, man.
They fucking rock.
They were on fucking fire. I don't know if they rock so much anymore because I looked up the only movies they've done, because this was a bomb.
Yeah.
And it cost about $35 million to make, which in an 80s movie, not cheap. In Japan, it made $10 million. In America, it made $1 million.
Yikes.
And that was pretty much it. And the sadder part is that director I mentioned, I think it's Yutaka Fujioka, he retired from the whole industry after this. I can't help but wonder if he was fired. And then he died like 6 years later.
That's a shame. Like, this must have been like something he really wanted to do, and it
meant a lot to him, and it did not work out for the studio, and I guess for himself as well. So
yeah, I mean,
if there's any caveat, this film does have fans.
It does, and I just want to say that, like, even though like the writing doesn't hold up past Act 2. Like, there are still like some phenomenal stuff you can get.
And I still feel like the writing before that is still generally shallow. Mm-hmm. But like I said, and I mentioned the wholesomeness, like if like QTT was a turnoff, maybe you won't like that. But I got to give it credit that it bucks the trend of trying like, kids movie, then we got to be raunchy, we got to make random movie references. This movie is for all intents and purposes timeless. I mean, the overall vibe, it kind of reminds me of like the old school Disney stuff.
I can see that, yeah.
And I'm sure this really took a lot of influence from, especially since they had some of those people involved.
Mm-hmm.
I would recommend it to people who love a visual, who can enjoy good visuals if the story doesn't interest them. And I would actually say anybody with kids, I think this is something kids could get a lot out of.
Yeah.
Because you certainly did.
Yeah, I did. I mean, obviously my parents didn't really pay much attention to what I watched, and if I was scared by something, then they would fucking know, because I would like run to their fucking room.
If your kid can deal with, because I still think the scariest part is the first 5 minutes with the train.
Mm-hmm.
And people say some of the other nightmare stuff scared them, but I think that's something kids would have easier time getting through.
Each kid is different.
Yes, give or take.
Give or take.
If they say turn it off. But otherwise,
your mileage will definitely vary. But I'm of the impression that parents should absolutely watch scary things with their kids, because you know that they're there. You'll be able to protect them. And let them know that everything's going to be all right. But if there's a life lesson to be learned, say from a stronger film like Don Bluth films, then you can teach them like, hey, these things are part of life.
We still get it in some. Like we praised Laika for it. I still think the end of Toy Story 3 is like the most intense part of a Disney Pixar movie, and other pictures. Coco isn't scary, but it delves into some dark and very devious acts that can very much happen in real life. Like stuff like that that's more under the radar, but dark when you think about it. But I gotta say, I just remembered we're talking about show the kids scary thing. Speaking of crazy YouTube comments, have you ever seen the movie The Witches?
I think I have. It's
a Roald Dahl adaptation about witches trying to turn kids into mice.
I did see that. Yeah,
good movie and good book. The movie is legit scary at points, mainly when the people are transforming into mice. Like Jim Henson did these custom animatronics with the midway points that look so creepy. So I looked up a YouTube compilation of when they turned the main witch into a mouse, which is like that. I remember I saw that and that stuck out to me. It's so freaky looking. And one comment stuck out. Why am I turned on by this? What the fuck is wrong with me?
What is wrong with YouTube? I don't understand.
And yet, that's still not as gross as the little Nemo comment that I'm not going to say.
Super gross. All right, yeah, I have to jump off, but this was fun.
I will say, okay, well, a very last quick thing, and I don't know if you're aware of this, because there's been a resurgence of stuff for me, literally, when I'm hearing about Little Nemo, because, like I said, Cartoon Lampoon podcast did an episode of it. Two of them were kind of like us. One of them fucking hated it, but they had some fun stuff to say. Here's the other thing. Did you hear about the reboot announcement?
Yes, I did.
So, I don't know if you can call it a reboot because it is... The press release does not mention this movie at all. It sounds like they're just going to focus solely on the strips from illustration. But on animation, the same studio that did The Little Prince, which I praised last year, is going to do a CG new movie based on the Little Nemo comic. It will be the first directorial thing by the guy who was the director of animation for Moana, which that was a gorgeous looking movie. So I'm curious to see what he can do with a full production under his wing. And I think I read like one or two other talented people, like one of the people find Frozen and stuff. And you heard me talk about how much I love Little Prince, so I have hope that this could be a cool movie.
Yeah, I think so too.
Maybe they can retain some of the best elements from this and deliver the more concrete story and characters we want.
I would love that, actually. Yeah, that would be fun. Yeah.
Time will tell. But yeah, so this is going to bring episode 26 to a close. It is past Chris's bedtime.
Yes, it is.
For his personal Slumberland. Mm-hmm. And so I will just, for people who don't know about our next episode, to continue with this theme month, episode 27 will be my pick. And I'm going to pick something I'd say is even more obscure over here because it never even got a fair shot. The French TV cartoon Dragon Hunters. Something that meant a lot to me when I discovered it in college. And still, honestly, looking at what I'm doing now, it's majorly rubbed off on stuff like Space Gist. And I will get into why we talk about it. And Chris, I will send you some episodes because it's a little hard to find.
Okay.
There's also a movie you don't have to watch. I'll bring it up because it's kind of like this, where there's a lot of cool stuff to it, but it's much more flawed than the show writing wise. But yeah, people go try and look up Dragon Hunters, specifically the first season. I will get into why. And I'm going to run this by you now. Would you be interested in, at some point soon after it comes out, doing a dedicated bonus episode for Infinity War?
For Infinity War, it depends on when. I'll keep it in mind. I can't make any promises.
If you can't, I might also reach out to Tyler because he sees a ton of movies, and I've been meaning to have him guest again. Like, would you be okay if it was just me and him talking that?
Sure, that's fine.
All right, I'll reach out to him. So people, we're going to try and see if we can do some sort of Infinity War episode because it is the most hyped I've ever been for a superhero movie. I'm sorry, Dark Knight Rises beat you in that regard, and I'm sure we're going to have a lot to say regardless of how I feel about it. So in the meantime, follow our Facebook and Twitter pages for more updates on stuff. I'll probably post in some stuff after this episode's out relating to Dragon Hunters and how to help you. I'm one of the only people who has uploaded clips of that show on my YouTube just because I love it so much. But yeah, so that will do it for episode 26. Thank you so much for listening. I am John Fleury.
And I'm Christopher Wade, everybody.
And Satana Pajama, Mamama, Dodema. I should just scream that for 5 minutes. Your silence speaks volumes.
Roll credits. Roll credits.
Roll credits before I get to it. But Satana Pajama.